Move down to the basement. I'm sleeping in the master bedroom tonight." My son said it like it was nothing, curt voice, eyes sliding over me as if I were a stranger hired to clean. I stood still in the living room where the ivory tablecloth my mother left me lay perfectly smooth and the good china caught the early sun. He had just returned after 24 hours missing one day after knocking me to the kitchen floor. Now he walked in, breathed in the smell of the bread I'd baked, and smiled like a winner sure his fists had made me obedient. I only answered softly, "All right, son." Then I turned away, hiding my trembling hands as I set them on the drawer by the door. Inside was the paper I'd prepared for months, a temporary protective order, effective this morning. He thought today's table was set to welcome him home. In truth, I was celebrating the day he left my life for good. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Clara Hensley, 69, widowed, living alone in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, where winter comes early and loneliness often lingers longer than the snow. I once thought my old age would be peaceful, reading, gardening, calling to check on my grandkids. But 7 years ago, my life opened its door to a storm. One October afternoon, Caleb, my son, showed up at the door with 2 worn suitcases and tired eyes. "Just a few weeks, Mom," he said, voice shaky like he might cry. I looked at his face, the boy I'd carried through so many blizzards, and asked nothing else. I opened the door and my heart. The house was too big for a widow, too silent since my husband George died of heart disease. I thought with my son here, at least the house would feel warm again. But weeks passed, then months. Caleb didn't go anywhere. He slept till noon, watched TV in the afternoon, and drank beer in the living room at night. I told myself, he's just worn out, he needs time. I cooked, did laundry, cleaned. Every time I started to bring up job, hunting, I'd see his shoulders droop and hear, "Don't start that now, Mom." One evening, when I cooked chicken instead of steak, Caleb exploded. "God, can you do anything right?" he shouted, and hurled the plate at the wall. Porcelain shattered across the kitchen floor, and a shard cut deep into my hand. I dropped to my knees to clean up, shaking and apologizing. I even promised to make something else just to keep the peace. While rinsing the cut, I told myself, he's stressed. It's my fault. I should have asked what he wanted. That was the first moment I blamed myself, and the moment hell opened its door. After that, the yelling became the house's background noise. Caleb yelled because breakfast was cold, the coffee too sweet, the tablecloth wrinkled. He said I walked too loud, that I even breathed wrong. I started tiptoeing, closing doors without a sound. Singing in the kitchen? Not anymore. I used to love cooking so much I'd hum Frank Sinatra while stirring sauce, but now I held my breath to stay safe. Every morning I got up at 5 a.m., made coffee exactly how he liked it, extra strong, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and it had to be in his father's gray mug. I cooked 3 different dinner options in case he didn't like one, and still, it was never enough. The yelling turned into touching. First a shoulder shove in the hallway, then a hard grip on my arm when I passed the salt, then the time he twisted my wrist out of joint because I didn't pour coffee fast enough. "Your fault. You're clumsy," he said, not even looking at me. And I foolish nodded. Because if I didn't believe that lie, I had to face something worse. My son, the one I'd raised with all my love and sacrifice, was becoming my abuser. Friends became memories. Nora Blake, my best friend for 30 years, still called weekly and asked me out for coffee, but I had to decline every time because Caleb would, conveniently, need me home. He'd say, "I'm tired, stay and make dinner," or just give me that cold look that told me leaving the house was a sin. After the 10th no, Nora stopped calling. My world shrank to 4 walls. A house with windows but no light. Mrs. Ellison, the neighbor across the street, once asked softly, "Clara, what happened to your arm?" I tugged my sleeve down and forced a smile. "I fell in the garden." Her eyes looked so sad, the look of someone who knows the truth but can't step in. I felt ashamed, not because of the bruise, but because of my own cowardice. Still, I lived like that for 7 years. 7 years enduring, 7 years persuading myself he was just going through a hard time, that a mother shouldn't abandon her child when he's weak. 7 years cooking in fear, sleeping in unease, and existing instead of living. The last slap, the one that knocked me down yesterday, wasn't the most painful, but it woke me up. That day, I'd made a pot of vegetable soup because the money was nearly gone. There was not even $300 left in the account. When Caleb saw the soup, he sneered, "Soup? You want me to starve?" I tried to explain we had to save, that the pension wouldn't come till the end of the month, that we could look for ways to cut costs together. But before I finished, he slapped me. I toppled out of the chair, hit the floor hard, felt my teeth clack. Blood spread salty in my mouth. I heard him say something like, "Clean this mess up, you useless thing." Then the TV clicked on and canned sitcom laughter filled the house. I lay there, back against the cold tile, staring up at the cracked ceiling, and realized I could die here under the hands of the son I gave birth to. No, I could not let that happen. Last night I lay awake till morning, plotting how to get out. I didn't have the strength to fight back, but I had what he didn't, a plan and patience. Today, when Caleb walked in with that smug, "Move to the basement," he didn't know every detail around him. The tablecloth, the pitcher of lemon water, the loaf of bread was part of my final goodbye script. The dining table looked beautiful in the early light, white and solemn. It was the table I once used to teach Caleb how to slice breakfast fruit, to host his 10th birthday party, to listen to my husband read poems when he was alive. Now that table would witness a beginning. I watched Caleb pour water, his eyes bright with that familiar self-satisfaction. "See, Mom? Everything's easier when you listen." I smiled, lips trembling but eyes steady. "You're right. He didn't know that in a few hours a police officer would knock on my door, say his name, and order him to leave by law. For 7 years I lived in fear. But this morning, I chose to live in freedom. And that's how it began, with a sentence that sounded ordinary but was the bell that ended my captivity in my own home. His name is Caleb, and he didn't know this morning. The table I set wasn't to welcome him. It was to send him off forever. After that morning, everything fell into a cold rhythm where I could barely recognize myself. Caleb started controlling everything money first. One day he stood in the kitchen holding the envelope with my pension I had just received. "Just let me hold it for convenience. You forget things, and people can take advantage of you. I'll manage it so you don't have to worry." His tone was gentle, but his eyes left no room for argument. I remember how it felt, my hand still gripping the envelope, my thumb pressed tight like keeping that paper meant keeping part of my life. Then I let go, like I always did. "Okay, you keep it." From that day, I slowly had to ask permission to live. "Want to buy medication?" Ask. "Want to go to the market?" Wait for him to check the balance. He'd say, "You're a big spender, always buying useless stuff." Useless, to him, was the tea I drank, a gardening magazine, or a pair of dishwashing gloves. He kept my bank card. I had only a few singles in my pocket, enough for bread or a little milk. Every dollar I had to ask for, with a forced smile. Over time, I stopped asking. I learned to read his mood to know when I could bring up medicine money and when I should stay quiet. Every morning, I got up at 5 a.m., I brewed coffee extra strong with 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and it always had to be in the gray mug with Dad's mug on it, the one my husband used. If I poured it into the wrong cup, he'd give me that knife-cold look. "Don't you respect my father?" My feet learned how to make no sound. I drifted through rooms barefoot, the floor cold under my skin. Even my breathing got cautious. I cooked 3 different dishes for dinner just in case. He didn't like one, but no matter what I did, his line landed like a curse. Never enough. I used to play music while I cooked. Elvis, Patsy Cline, Frank Sinatra, the songs George and I slow danced to in the living room. Now, if I so much as hummed, he'd growl, "Your voice annoys me." So, I went quiet. The home that once was a nest turned into a steel cage. Everything had rules I had to memorize. Don't turn on the TV when he's on his phone. Don't tidy the living room when he's sleeping. Don't stay on the phone too long. Don't let the water run too hard when washing dishes. I lived in fear of collisions, literal and figurative. His long silences scared me more than his outbursts, because I knew the storm was just paused. Then the smallest thing would set it off. That Thursday night was cold and damp. I made vegetable soup because the fridge held only carrots, celery, and a few potatoes. There was not even $300 left in the account. I was stretching it to month's end. I set the bowl in front of him and said gently, "Try it, there's some chicken in there today." Caleb looked at the bowl, then at me, face twisted like I'd insulted him. "Soup again?" His voice dropped, and I knew what was coming. "You serving me garbage?" I kept my voice steady. "It's just for now. By the end of the week I'll—" Before I could finish, he flipped the bowl. Hot liquid splashed my hand, burning. Soup poured across the table, onto the floor, spreading like a pale stain. Then the slap. Fast, hard, so sudden all I saw was the kitchen light spinning. The chair crashed, I hit the tile. My knee slammed, shoulder burned, and a stabbing pain in my side made it hard to breathe. I heard his voice, distant but clear. "Get up, clean this mess, useless." And then the TV. American sitcom laughter filled the house like nothing had happened. I lay there for minutes or hours, I don't know, shaking, breathing short, heart racing. Blood at my lip, soup in my hair, wind at the window. No one else on earth knew what had just happened. Just me, him, and the walls. When I stood, my back felt split in two. I picked up a rag and slowly wiped every puddle. Each bend sent a knife through my side. I didn't dare cry. I was afraid the sound would bring him back. When it was clean like it never happened, I stood at the window. My reflection was a blur. Gray hair in tangles, sunken eyes, a face bruised and swollen. Streetlight glow made my skin look like wax. I touched the glass and whispered, "Who are you, Clara?" The woman in the glass didn't answer. That night I didn't eat. I sat by the bed, holding a cold teacup, listening to the clock tick. Each beat was a warning. Part of me wanted to run, but another part was tied down by fear and mother love. Even beaten and humiliated, my heart hurt thinking of the boy who once fit in my arms. I remembered him at 8, when bullies picked on him at school. I'd stood on that playground and shouted, "Don't touch my son!" I had promised I'd always protect him, and now I was the one who needed protection from him. Around 3 a.m., I heard the door open. Caleb came back from drinking. The hall filled with beer, cigarettes, and sweat. I held my breath and listened to the heavy steps. His door slammed. Silence. I stared into the dark, and for the first time in years, a thought came cold and clear. If I stay, I'll die. Maybe not today, but soon. Not a gentle death in my sleep, but a quiet one on the kitchen floor in a house full of TV laughter, where no one knows and no one finds me in time. I looked at the little room and the old photos, our wedding, Caleb's birthdays, the beach trip years ago. I saw another woman in them, blonde hair, bright smile, eyes full of light. She'd been gone a long time. I realized I was no longer afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying without living again first. That night, I didn't pray the usual prayer. I didn't ask God for endurance. I asked for courage to stop enduring, and in the heavy silence of that, I made a decision. There will be no next time. No more yelling, no more hits. I wouldn't scream or seek revenge. I'd do what he would never expect. I would get out of this cage and take myself back. No savior, no miracle. Just the belief that I deserve to live. I looked out the window where moonlight caught the raindrops from the afternoon. They glittered like 100 small eyes watching me as if the world were witnessing my quiet vow. Tomorrow, I whispered, everything changes. For the first time in 7 years, I smiled not from joy, but because I knew the fear inside me had started to crack. After a sleepless night, when the first thin light slipped through the curtain, I got up with a body so sore I had to hold the wall to stand. Every movement stabbed my ribs like a small knife, but I walked to the low dresser, the place where, for years, I kept what little freedom I had left. It's an old, dark wood dresser with a third drawer only I knew how to press her. Lock. I opened it with the tiny key hidden in the pin jar. Inside was my worn expense ledger, pages yellowed at the corners. Between lines of careful numbers, groceries, utilities, medicine lay a small brown envelope. I had tucked it there long ago, stashing a few dollars whenever Caleb didn't notice. Counting it now came to $320, not much, but all the freedom I had left. I sat and smoothed each bill. They smelled faintly damp, like my fear, locked away too long from the light. Beneath the envelope lay a small business card with frayed edges. Marilyn Ortega, social worker, Franklin County Senior Assistance. At the top corner was Mrs. Ellison's handwriting, the neighbor across the street. If anything happens, call her. Don't endure alone. I remember the day she gave it to me. It was spring. I was clipping roses when she came to the fence and said quietly, "Clara, are you okay? I heard a loud noise the other day." I smiled and lied. "It's nothing." I dropped a pan. She stared a long time, unconvinced. Before she left, she pressed the card into my hand. "Just in case," she said. I kept it for years, never daring to use it until today. I slipped the envelope of cash into the inside pocket of my coat and tucked Marilyn's card against my chest, where I could feel it with my hand, a small reminder I still had a chance. When I looked up, the mirror showed a face that no longer looked like mine. My right eye was swollen purple, my lips split, bruises spreading toward my ear. Part of me wanted to walk out the door right then, but I knew if I went out looking like that, someone would ask, and Caleb would find out. I needed time, days, for the swelling to fade, for him to believe I'd learned my lesson. In the days that followed, I became the good mother he always wanted. I bowed my head, said yes, didn't argue, didn't meet his eyes. I served meals on time, brewed coffee to spec, cleaned without a sound. When he passed by, I stepped back. I let him see a woman completely subdued. Caleb started to look satisfied. He'd pass me in the living room with a smug nod. "See? Not so hard," he said, smirking. "You just need to know who's in charge." I smiled, empty and hollow, but enough to keep him fooled. Inside, I counted days and hours. I'd waited too long not to be quiet now. "Sunday night," he said. "Tomorrow I'm meeting friends. I'll be back in the afternoon. Have dinner at 8. Make steak. I want a proper meal." I nodded. "All right, son." In my head, "Good. Go. As far as you can." Monday morning was gray. Cold wind pressed at the kitchen window. I heard the lock turn, then the front door close. Caleb's pickup rolled off the drive. I stood still for a few seconds, making sure he was truly gone. The house was empty, just the clock on the wall ticking. My hands shook as I lifted the phone. My fingers were so numb, I misdialed twice. On the third try, it rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then a warm, steady woman's voice. "Franklin County Senior Assistance. This is Marilyn Ortega. How can I help you?" I choked. For a moment it felt like a rope cinched around my throat. No sound came out. I only heard my own ragged breathing and my heart hammering. "I'm sorry. I stammered. My name is Clara Hensley. I need help. She paused on the other end, then her voice softened, like speaking to a frightened child. I'm here, Clara. It's okay. Take your time. Are you safe right now? That question made me cry. I couldn't answer at first, only heard my own small, shaky sobs in the receiver. At last I whispered, No, but I want to be. All right, she said. Can you come to my office today? Or I can come to you if needed. I checked the clock. It was 10:30 a.m. Caleb wouldn't return before 6 p.m. I had nearly 8 hours. I can come, I said, still shaky. I know. Where it is. Good. Meet me at 41 Arlington Street, 2nd floor, room 204. Do you want me to have an officer escort you? No, I rushed. I just need to get there. She was quiet a moment, then gentle. I understand. Bring ID if you can. And Clara, you just did something very brave. I hung up and sat still for a long time. A strange feeling rose, neither relief nor fear. It was like standing at the edge of a very high cliff, knowing one more step means there's no going back. I changed into my plainest clothes, brown slacks, gray sweater, a scarf to cover the bruises. I checked the mirror, less swollen, but the faint purple still there. A little powder to blur it, a touch of lipstick to look less washed out. Each motion made me feel like a criminal pretending to be ordinary. Before leaving, I grabbed my keys, the cash, and Marilyn's address on a slip of paper. I glanced back at the dining table where the ivory cloth lay smooth. Yesterday, I'd washed and ironed it like I was preparing a farewell only I knew about. My hand paused on the doorknob. The whole house seemed to hold its breath with me. In my head, Caleb's voice, "Don't you ever leave without telling me." I tightened my grip. "No one tells me that anymore," I whispered. The door opened and the morning cold hit my face. Freedom smells different, like wind, wet leaves. Life outside I'd forgotten. I stepped out and pulled the door gently closed without locking it. I wanted police to be able to enter easily if needed when I came back. The street was quiet. Sparrows lifted off the fence. I pulled my coat tight and hurried toward downtown. Each step matched a hard heartbeat. Every sound behind me made me flinch. But no one called my name. No familiar engine. Only when I saw the sign Arlington Building 41 did I breathe out. My hand shook so badly I had to grab the rail on the steps. A bell chimed when I opened the office door, warm, light. A few green plants on the desk. A beige upholstered chair. A woman in her 50s with neatly tied brown hair stood and smiled. "Are you Clara?" I just nodded. "Welcome. I'm Marilyn." Her voice was low, clear, carrying a calm I'd forgotten people could have. She handed me a glass of water and offered a seat. I sat, hands still clamped on my bag. Marilyn looked at me without pity and asked softly, "Would you like to tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth and the first words came out shaky like a child learning to speak. "I've lived with my son 7 years, and I think, if I don't do something, he'll kill me." She didn't interrupt, didn't press. She just nodded, brown eyes deep like they were holding every word. I told her about the shouting, the slaps, walking barefoot in my own home. About fear, about forgetting who I was. Each sentence felt like shedding a layer of chain. When I finished, Marilyn said just one line, "You're not crazy. And you're not alone, Clara. From here on, we'll find the way out together." That simple sentence was the first spark I'd felt in my heart in years of darkness. And I knew if I had any strength left, I would follow that spark all the way. Marilyn's office wasn't big, but as soon as I stepped in, my chest eased. Soft light filtered through the window onto the light wood desk and touched the green leaves in small pots. The smell of fresh coffee and a hint of orange bergamot oil made the room warm and safe, a scent I hadn't known in years. Marilyn sat across from me with a small notebook. Her voice was steady but firm. "Clara, remember this. Sons don't have the right to hit their mothers. No one has that right." I lowered my head, tears falling onto my hands. Simple words, but like a key opening the invisible shackle I'd worn for 7 years. All that time I believed I deserved it, that if I were better, quieter, Caleb would stop being angry. Now a stranger told me what I'd forgotten. Violence is never love. Marilyn poured coffee and said gently, "Start from the beginning. Slowly. I'll document everything." I told it all morning. Coffee, fear-filled dinners, punches and insults. Whenever I stopped choking up, she just nodded. Between us, there was no pity, only listening and trust. When I finished, Marilyn set the notebook down and said quietly, "Now we need to do something important. I have to photograph your injuries as evidence." She took out a camera, asked permission, and began to take pictures. The bruise on my cheek, the purple marks on my wrist, the small split on my lip. The shutter clicked, and strangely, instead of shame, I felt relief, as if my pain was finally being seen. She made a few more notes, then pulled a business card from a drawer. "I want you to meet someone. He's an attorney who handles domestic violence cases. His name is Graham Porter. He works with our center and offers free help in urgent situations like yours." I looked at the card and felt that old fear rise. I'm not sure. I don't want to make it a big deal. If Caleb finds out, he'll lose it. Marilyn took my hand, warm and steady. "I understand your fear, Clara. But right now, you need a team to protect you. Not for revenge, but for survival." She paused, meeting my eyes. "If you do nothing, he will continue. And next time, you might not be here to tell me this story." A chill ran through me. I was quiet a long time, then nodded. "Okay, I'll meet him." That afternoon, Marilyn took me to attorney Graham Porter's office just a few blocks away. His practice was in an old building with a glass door and a sign that read, "Legal Aid for Survivors of Abuse." Not fancy, not flashy, but I could feel the professionalism in every detail, from the perfectly aligned bookshelves to the framed law degree on the wall. Graham was around 60, with lightly graying hair and round frames. He stood to shake my hand, firm but not forceful. "Marilyn has filled me in," he began, calm and steady. "You've endured far too long, Clara. Now it's time we take back control." I sat down, heart pounding. He opened a file, laid out the papers, and spoke slowly so I could follow each step. "We'll file for a temporary protective order. This is a legal document that bars Caleb from coming near you or contacting you in any way. If he violates it, the police can arrest him immediately." I clenched my hands. "What if he snaps? What if he shows up before the police get there?" Graham nodded. "That's a fair question. So we won't take risks. Everything will be planned. In the next 48 hours, we will. Tomorrow morning, you'll go to the bank with me to restore your accounts and block his secondary card. After that, we'll file the protective order with the court. Finally, the police will accompany us to serve the order. At that point, Caleb will be required to leave." He paused, his eyes softening. "You won't have to be afraid anymore, Clara. But we'll take it one step at a time, all right?" I looked at my hands trembling on my lap and nodded. "One step," I repeated. Graham gave a small smile. "Exactly. No need to rush. We just need the right direction." Marilyn, seated beside me, added, "Do you have somewhere safe to stay? If you need it, we can arrange a secure place for a few days." I shook my head. "No. I want to go home. I need to. If I stay there one more night, he won't be suspicious." They exchanged a look, then both nodded. Graham handed me an envelope with copies of the paperwork and an emergency number. "Keep this on you. If he threatens you or touches you, call the police immediately." I held the file to my chest like something sacred. For the first time in years, I had a clear purpose. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was moving toward freedom. I got home at the usual hour, careful enough that my footsteps made no sound. Caleb was in front of the TV, beer in hand. He glanced over. "Why were you gone so long at the store?" "Crowded today," I said with a thin smile. He nodded, said nothing, and turned back to the game. I watched his shadow crawl across the wall, broad shoulders, lowered head, the flicker of the TV making his face look like two people at once, a lost boy and a stranger full of spite. I stepped into the kitchen, put the bags away, and started dinner. My hands shook a little, but my mind was steady. Every motion had a purpose. Chop the vegetables, rinse the meat, set the pot to boil. I thought through tomorrow's plan: bank, courthouse, then the protective order. Each step felt like a small stone laid across the river of fear I was about to cross. When Caleb went to bed, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in months. I set the file on the table and read each line carefully, stopping at the bold words, "Temporary protective order request." Below that was the signature line, "Applicant, Clara Hensley." Seeing my name on that paper made my heartbeat change, not from fear, but from hope. I sat down and wrote a few lines in the little notebook I keep by the bed. Tomorrow, I start again. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I deserve a life without fear. Outside, wind moved through the trees, dry leaves whispering like a quiet blessing. The warm light in my room pooled over the page, lighting up my shaky signature proof that this woman had decided to stand up. I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. In the dark, my heart still beat hard, but this time it wasn't panic. It was life. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't in despair anymore. I lay there listening to the clock tick, each beat a reminder. Just one more day, Clara. One more day and freedom begins. The next morning, the sky was softly gray, wind threading through the trees in front of the house, dry leaves spinning on the sidewalk. I put on an old brown coat to cover the bruise on my neck and wrapped a scarf around my shoulders. When Graham pulled up, I was on the porch with a small canvas bag, some important papers, and my last 3 $10 bills. He gave me a gentle smile, steady and warm. "All right, Clara?" I nodded, took a deep breath. Better than I thought. We drove to Franklin Community Bank, where I'd opened a joint account with Caleb 6 years ago when he was still pretending to be a good son. In my head, I could still hear him back then. "I'll help you manage it, Mom. You won't have to worry." Now, I knew I'd handed the keys to my life to the wrong person. Inside the lobby, the smell of floor cleaner mixed with coffee from the teller counter. A money counter hummed in the corner. My heart sped up, like every little beep was a reminder of the losses I'd been carrying. Graham went first and told the receptionist we had an appointment with Patricia Lawrence, the branch manager. A moment later, a woman around 50 in a navy suit came out with a professional smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Hensley. Come on back. I've been briefed by Mr. Porter's office." In a private room, Graham summarized the situation, calm but firm. Mrs. Hensley's son seized control of her finances, used an unauthorized secondary card, and there are signs of abuse. We want to restore full ownership to her. Patricia nodded and started typing. "Understood. We'll need to verify identity and have you re-execute the account ownership documents." My hand shook as I signed Clara Hensley. Those 3 words, just a formality on paper, made my chest ache. I hadn't signed my name on anything important in years. Every letter felt like a declaration. I still have authority over my own life. Patricia handed me a checklist of what we'd do. Cancel the secondary card in the name of Caleb Hensley. Change all PINs and passwords. Set up automatic alerts for any withdrawals. Each time she marked completed on her screen, I felt lighter, as if another cord had been cut from my hands. When we finished the last item, Patricia looked up and said gently, "Mrs. Hensley, from now on only you can access and use this account." If anyone else tries, our system will alert you and the bank immediately." I looked at her, then at Graham, unable to speak. A lump pressed hard in my throat. I had to breathe a few times before I could say, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me back a piece of my breath." Patricia smiled and touched my shoulder. "You don't owe anyone for this, Clara. You just took back what was already yours." When we stepped outside, sunlight was breaking through the clouds, catching the glass facade and turning it into something like a mirror. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth touch my skin, a feeling I thought I'd forgotten. Our next stop was the Franklin County Courthouse, a red brick building with high stone steps and heavy wooden doors. I clutched the file Marilyn had prepared: injury photos, my statement, copies of financial documents. With every step down the long hallway, my heart pounded. The waiting area outside the filing office was more crowded than I expected. Mostly women, some young, some well past 70. A brown-skinned woman sat beside me with a sleeping baby in her arms. Across from us, a silver-haired lady watched quietly, eyes that seemed to see entire lifetimes. I looked at them and recognized a version of myself in each face. Women who had been quiet too long but chose to stand up today. When it was my turn, Graham went with me and turned in our packet. The clerk flipped through each page, checked the photos, then nodded. "Everything's in order. Judge Harper is on duty today. She's very fair." We waited nearly an hour before they called us in. Judge Harper. Short hair. Glasses. A serious face. Read our file slowly, line by line. I held my breath as she turned to the last page. Then, she signed, swift and certain. "Temporary protective order, effective immediately." I stared at the words, hardly believing them. Harper looked up and said, "This order is in effect for 15 days. During that time, Caleb Hensley is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you, from contacting you in any form, and is required to vacate the shared residence immediately. Enforcement will be handled by the police." Her voice wasn't loud, but each word rang through me like a bell. Required to vacate. I took the order, my hands shaking so hard the letters blurred. Graham touched my shoulder lightly. "This is your first legal shield, Clara. Keep it on you. Don't let it out of your sight." I nodded and swallowed back tears. That thin piece of paper, just a few lines of black on white, felt as heavy as my whole life. For the first time in years, the law stood. On my side, not his. "Now for the final step," Graham said as we left the courtroom. "Serve the order and make sure he leaves." I stopped in the lobby, my heart slamming. "Today? Right now. We'll go with the police. I won't let you face him alone." We drove to the Franklin police station. The intake room smelled like paper, ink, and old coffee. Graham presented the order and requested assistance. A young officer came out and introduced himself. "Officer Miguel Ramirez. I'll be handling this." He was tall and solid, his eyes steady but not cold. When we shook hands, he said, "Mrs. Hensley, we're here to protect you today. I need to confirm, do you believe he's home now?" I nodded. "Yes. He usually gets back before 6. It's just past 4:30. Good. We'll arrive before he expects us. I'll be the one to read the order. You stand behind me and don't say anything unless necessary." Graham looked at me, voice low and sure. It is the hardest part, Clara, and the most necessary. Remember, you've done nothing wrong. Everything you're doing today is to protect yourself." I gripped the file. Fear and relief pushed against each other inside me. It felt like climbing a steep hill with a cliff ahead and fire behind. There was no going back. As we got into the patrol car, a siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Light rain began to fall, pattering on the windshield and sliding into long streaks. Through the glass, I watched the trees blur. A drop rolled down my cheek. I couldn't tell if it was rain or a tear. Graham asked softly, "Clara, do you want me to speak before the officer reads the order?" I shook my head. No, I want to witness it. I need to see it with my own eyes. Ramirez nodded. Good. When we arrive, just stand still. Mister, Porter and I will handle the rest. The car turned onto my street, the white picket fence coming into view. I drew a breath, my heartbeat pounding like a drum. My house, once a haven, then a prison, was about to be returned to its rightful owner. I tightened my fists and whispered a prayer. Lord, give me the strength to stand. We pulled up to the drive. Ramirez stepped out, the black rain shell draped over his shoulders. Graham turned to me with a small smile. It's time, Clara. I nodded and stepped onto the cold, wet ground. The order shook in my hand under the light rain, but I didn't hide it. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. Ramirez climbed the steps and knocked hard. The sound echoed through the rain into every wall that had held my fear. Footsteps inside, then Caleb's voice, rough as ever. Who is it? I swallowed and tightened my grip on the file. Franklin Police, Ramirez called, calm and clear. I need to speak with you, Caleb Hensley. With a single knock on the door, 7 years of fear cracked like glass. Do you feel that's the moment most worthy of saying enough? Tell me how it felt to you. In that moment, I realized every painful road I'd walked these 7 years led here, and I was ready to step out of my cage for good. The patrol car turned into my drive, its tires scraping over the wet gravel. Through the fogged window, I saw Caleb's silver pickup already parked by the garage. My chest tightened. He was home. Every cell in my body stretched taut, afraid, and determined. Officer Ramirez killed the engine and looked at me. Rain traced long lines down the windshield like time itself, long, cold, and irreversible. Clara, he said, voice low and crisp. When I go in, you stand behind me. Don't speak, don't argue, don't react if he gets heated. The law will handle it. Understand? I nodded, though my throat was dry. I understand. From the back seat, Graham handed me the order sealed in a plastic sleeve. Keep it in your hand. If he resists, just hold it up. Don't say a word. I squeezed the page until my palm warmed. At it. One sheet of paper, the only thing between me and 7 years of terror. Ramirez opened the door and the rain rushed in, along with the heavy sound of boots on the wooden steps. He knocked 3 decisive times. The echo carried across the porch. I stood a few feet behind him, hearing my heart thud like a drum. The door swung open. Caleb stood there, hair a mess, wrinkled t-shirt, face flushed. His eyes slid past me and locked onto Ramirez. What the hell is this? He snarled. Why'd you bring cops to my house? Ramirez didn't budge. His tone stayed even. Mr. Hensley, this is not your house. This is the legal residence of Mrs. Clara Hensley. We're here to enforce a temporary protective order issued by the Franklin court this morning. For a second, Caleb's face went pale. Then it burned red. What? What kind of joke is this? He whipped toward me, voice scraping like metal. Mom, what did you do? I didn't answer. Ramirez took a half step forward, blocking his line to me. You have 60 minutes to collect essential belongings and leave. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Hensley. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. You don't have the right. We have a court order. Graham cut in, holding the paper out. You may read it, but you can't keep it. Caleb snatched it, eyes scanning fast. I watched his throat twitch and his jaw clamp tight. He started crumpling the page, but Ramirez stepped in, firm and final. You're obstructing enforcement. Calm down, gather your things, and go. In that instant, the person in his eyes was no longer the one who used to call me Mom in a small mourning voice. I saw only a stranger, furious at losing control. He backed up and slammed his palm against the wall. This isn't over, he hissed through his teeth. You think you've won? You'll regret humiliating me. Ramirez's hand rose to his belt, brushing cuffs. That's a threat, Mr. Hensley. I suggest you focus on packing. The house felt so heavy I could hear the rain tapping the window. Caleb growled and stomped up the stairs. Each thudding step hit my heart like an invisible blow. I stayed still. Graham murmured at my ear, "Don't watch, don't speak. Let the law do the talking." 30 minutes later, the clatter of things being thrown bounced down the stairwell suitcase, clothes, a couple pairs of shoes. He came into view with an old duffel slung over his shoulder, eyes still bloodshot. He stopped at the last step and stared hard at me. "I can't believe you did this to your own son." I swallowed and answered, quiet but firm, "I didn't do anything to you, Caleb. I chose to survive." He scoffed, smirked, then shoved the door open. The suitcase tumbled off the porch, popped open, and his clothes spilled into the rain. I didn't bend to pick them up. Ramirez motioned him away. When Caleb's engine growled, I heard the tires grind the gravel, spitting mud and water. Then, silence. The house felt shockingly empty. No more heavy footsteps. No more, "Where are you?" barked from the hall. No more looming shape in the kitchen every evening. Just the clock's steady tick and the smell of cooling coffee on the table. I stood there, hands still trembling, until Ramirez came back with a gentler tone. "Are you all right, Mrs. Hensley?" I nodded, lips moving before sound came. A long breath left me, carrying years of pressure with it. My knees gave and I sank into a chair, tears falling before I knew they were there. Ramirez set a hand on my shoulder, then made a slow circuit of the house. He checked windows, secured the back door, and jotted a few notes. "The kitchen window needs a new lock." I installed an extra latch on the front door. He pulled a small card and wrote a hotline on the back. "If he returns or even lingers outside, call 911 immediately. Don't go out, not even to talk. All right?" I nodded, my voice rough. "All right." Graham stepped forward and placed a slip of paper on the table. "This is my personal cell. Anytime you feel uneasy, day or night, call me." They left quietly. Ramirez paused on the threshold. "You were very brave today, Clara. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I watched them go as the door closed. The patrol car's engine faded until only the soft rain on the porch remained. I stood and walked the house slowly. Each step felt like a small pilgrimage through the living room, down the hall, into the kitchen where I'd been shoved to the floor. I laid my hand on the wooden table, on the fridge door, on the old photo of Evan, my husband. "Do you see this?" I whispered. I finally did it. I opened a window and let the air in. Cool wind poured through, carrying damp earth and wet leaves. I breathed deep and felt the quiet fill the space where boots, shouts, and anger had lived. For the first time in 7 years, the house was quiet and it wasn't scary. I towel-dried my hair, changed my shirt, and opened the fridge. A few vegetables, some potatoes, a bit of butter, and a packet of egg noodles. I set water to boil, chopped the vegetables, and seasoned with salt and pepper. Steam fogged the glass. My reflection in the mist wasn't the same woman who'd trembled here days ago. When the soup was ready, I brought it to the table. No candles, no flowers, no TV. Just me, a chipped ceramic bowl, and the clean smell of herbs. I lifted a spoon, blew on it, and tasted. It didn't taste like fear anymore. I ate slowly, spoon by spoon, tasting the light sweetness of the broth, the softness of the potatoes, the butter melting at the edge of my tongue. Each spoonful was a statement, I am living. I have taken back the reins. Night fell. I sat by the window and watched the rain taper off. Streetlights hit the wet leaves and laid a soft orange on the road. Something in me unfolded not joy exactly, but a new, fragile peace. I murmured to myself, silence. But this time it's the silence of freedom. In the dark glass, I saw my own faint smile, shaky, small but real. The next morning I woke not to pounding on a door, not to heavy footsteps, not to an angry voice. I heard only the soft clock and saw warm gold slipping through the curtains. For the first time in years, I woke in peace. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee just for me. No rushing, no flinching, no orders. I turned on the old radio and let a bit of jazz fill the quiet. A low saxophone curled through the smell of fresh coffee and the strip of sun on the floor. I pulled the curtains open and the window, too. No stale smoke, no spilled beer, just wood, sunlight, and the scent of roses from the small backyard. I sat at the table and watched the light fall across the ivory tablecloth, the same place that had held too many rages. Now it held only calm, a new beginning. At noon, I did something I hadn't dared in years. I called Nora Blake. Nora had been my closest friend before Caleb took over my life. We used to see plays, go to charity luncheons, swap recipes. Then one day I vanished from her world, excuses like tired, busy, not ready to see anyone. Truth was, I was ashamed. I didn't want her to see the bruises or ask, "What happened, Clara?" I dialed the number I still knew by heart. 3 rings. "Clara?" Nora's voice, a little unsteady. I choked up. "It's me. I'm sorry I disappeared for so long." There was a pause, then she burst into tears. "Oh God, Clara, I was afraid you were gone." I laughed through my own tears. We talked for 10 minutes, both of us breaking down more than once. Finally, Nora said, "Tomorrow, coffee at the old place? I'll reserve a table on the patio for us." I whispered, "I'll be there. This time, I can come." When I hung up, I sat for a long time, warm and aching all at once. Some friendships wait right where you left them until you're strong enough to come back. That afternoon, Mrs. Ellison, the elderly neighbor who'd given me Marilyn's card, appeared at the gate with a basket of oranges and a few sprigs of rosemary. "I heard it's over," she said, eyes gentle but sure. "If you need someone to talk to, I'm always home. I never lock my door." I squeezed her hand, trembling a little. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellison. You saved me, even if you don't realize it." She smiled. "I only planted a seed, Clara. You're the one who replanted your life." Night returned, and the house settled into quiet again. No TV noise, no clinking bottles, no slamming doors. But the quiet itself made me restless. Every muscle still held the old survival reflex, listening, bracing. I fully charged my phone and set it on the nightstand. Under the bed, I slid the old baseball bat Evan had used when he taught Caleb as a boy. Back then, it was a father-son memory. Now it helped me sleep. Near midnight, I heard something outside. A strange car idled at the curb, headlights brushing the window. I shot upright, heart racing. 10 seconds. 20. Then the engine revved and drove off. I took a breath, went to the window, and wrote the license plate down with a shaking hand. First thing in the morning, I called Graham and told him everything. "You did exactly right, Clara," he reassured me. "Caution is never wasted. I'll let Ramirez know to keep an eye on the area." Nothing else happened, but that alertness clung to me all day. I realized my body didn't yet know how to be safe. It needed to relearn how to breathe, to rest, to believe no one was standing right behind me. In the days that followed, I started learning how to live again. In the morning, I made coffee and put fresh flowers on the dining table. At noon, I walked around the neighborhood, the streets I used to avoid because I was afraid of meeting the neighbors' eyes. In the evening, I turned on warm lights throughout the house, read on the sofa, and listened to the songs Evan used to love. I learned how to sleep again, not with pills, but with breathing. Every night, I counted each inhale and exhale so my heart could relearn a normal rhythm. At first, I slept 2 hours, then 3, then 4. Every morning I woke to sunlight, I knew I was making progress. Marilyn called me every day at exactly 8 a.m. "Good morning, Clara. Have you had breakfast?" "I'm having coffee," I'd answer. sometimes laughing at how consistent she was. Very good. Today is the 6th day you've been safe. I want you to write that number down somewhere. It will remind you that with each passing day, you're a little stronger. Those calls, simple as they seemed, kept me from slipping into the void. She wasn't just a social worker anymore. She became the anchor that kept me in the present. A week later, a letter arrived from the present court, the hearing for a permanent protective order scheduled for 10 days later. I read it carefully, my heart full of worry and resolve. It would be my first time telling everything in court, possibly in front of Caleb. I began to prepare. Every day, I practiced my statement like it was a survival drill, brief, honest, and not reactive. Graham warned. He'll try to say you're confused, exaggerating, or out for revenge. Let the truth stand on its own. You don't need emotion, just clarity. I wrote the key points on paper: times, places, and the level of abuse. Medical evidence, injury photos, and the police report. Statements from Marilyn and Officer Ramirez. Each time I read it, my hands shook less. My voice grew steadier. I practiced looking straight into the mirror and asked myself, if my son stood in front of me now, would I be afraid? And each day, the answer became clearer. No, I'm not afraid anymore. One afternoon, Nora stopped by, with a still warm apple pie. I hear you're practicing your statement, she said, setting the pie on the table. But remember, Clara, your words are not just evidence. They're the story of a survivor. Anyone who hears it, including the judge, will feel that. I looked at her and smiled slightly. You still talk like a philosophy teacher, Nora. She winked. Because I used to teach philosophy, remember? We both laughed for the first time. A laugh rang through this house without making me flinch. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea. The sky was calm, the moon full and bright, lighting up the little garden. The rose beds I'd neglected were blooming again, slowly but surely. I breathed in, smelling earth and grass. I thought about the simple things I'd forgotten. Sitting still, breathing, living. No need to prove anything, no need to bow my head, no need to ask permission. In that gentle darkness, I spoke softly, not to anyone in Terriu. Particular, just to myself. I'm still here, I'm still alive, and I will never be silent again. I tilted my face to the sky. No more rain, no more shadows falling across the window. Only moonlight, night wind, and crickets humming like an old song coming back to life. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, one breath of freedom, of real life. And for the first time, I felt something simple I had forgotten for 7 years. Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's knowing you're no longer afraid of it. The hallway at the Franklin courthouse was packed that morning. The smell of coffee mingled with old paper, shoes clicked on stone floors, and small conversations rolled around me like waves. I sat on a bench, fingers laced together, palms cold with sweat. Next to me was Graham in a gray suit and deep blue tie, calm, as if he could organize a storm with just a look. On my other side, Marilyn sat quietly, a file in her hands, laying a gentle hand on my shoulder now, and then, as if to say, I'm here. The courtroom door opened, and I saw him. Caleb. He came from the opposite hall in a white dress shirt and black slacks. Hair combed his face so polished it made my skin crawl. A tall man in glasses walked with him, likely his lawyer. His eyes swept past me, then paused. In that moment, I saw what I'd known for 7 years, arrogance and challenge. But this time, I didn't lower my head. Graham murmured. Look straight ahead, Clara. Don't let him control the air. I nodded and drew a breath. I know. When the clerk called our case, I stood. My legs trembled a little, but I didn't need anyone to hold me up. We entered the courtroom, where Judge Harper was already on the bench, the same short-haired woman with a gaze both stern and even. I remembered her voice from the temporary order. Today, it rang out again. Hearing on the petition for a permanent protective order between Mrs. Clara Hensley and Mr. Caleb Hensley now in session. The room fell still. I could hear the wall clock ticking. Harper looked at me. Mrs. Hensley, please explain why you're requesting the order. Graham gave a small nod, as if to say, be yourself. I stood, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. I glanced at the benches filled with strangers, but I felt many eyes of sympathy. I began slow and low. Your Honor, I lived with my son Caleb for 7 years. In those 7 years, I lost things one by one. My money, my friends, my health, and my own voice. It started with, Mom, let me hold your money for safety, and turned into having to ask permission to buy my own medicine. I eventually couldn't choose my meals, couldn't sing in the kitchen, couldn't open a window. And if I forgot those rules, I was reminded by hands, not words. I heard someone in the room hold their breath. Harper nodded for me to continue. The breaking point, I said, my voice shaking, was a Thursday night. I made soup, the dish my son used to like. He flipped the whole pot onto the floor and called it trash. When I reacted, he slapped me, then turned on the TV like nothing had happened. That night, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, and I understood, if I didn't act, I would die right there in that kitchen. Harper made a few notes. Go on, Mrs. Hensley. I'm not asking the court to punish my son, I said slowly, looking straight at her. I'm not trying to get revenge. I just want peace in my own home. I want to live without fear every time I hear footsteps. Graham nodded slightly. Marilyn pressed her lips together, eyes a little wet. The judge turned to the other side. Mr. Caleb Hensley, your response? Caleb stood, tugged at his collar, and smirked. Your Honor, my mother. Her memory isn't what it used to be. She trips a lot, spills food, then thinks I hit her. I only helped her clean up. She's clumsy, forgetful, and tends to imagine things. I've never laid a hand on her. I closed my eyes. That voice, slick and confident, had once made me doubt myself. Harper gestured to Graham. Graham stood and pulled 3 photos from the file. Your Honor, these were taken by social worker Marilyn Ortega on March 8th, one day after the incident. The bruising on the left cheek and wrist is consistent with impact from a slap and compression from gripping, not from a fall. Harper took the photos, studied them closely, then looked at Caleb. Do you have any other explanation for these injuries? His attorney cut in, cool and flat. Your Honor, there are no direct witnesses and no medical records. Everything relies on a one-sided account. Graham answered immediately, without checking his notes. Exactly. Domestic violence happens behind closed doors. If we required a witness every time, no woman would live long enough to tell the story. The room went silent. Harper set down her pen. Objection noted. Caleb leaned forward. My mother is trying to ruin my reputation. She needs a psychiatrist, not a protective order. Harper tapped the gavel. Order! This is not a place for shouting. I looked at him. For the first time, what I saw in his eyes wasn't an almighty rage, but a panic leaking through the mask. Harper turned back to me. Anything further before the court rules? I breathed in. I just want to be allowed to lock my door without fearing someone will break in. I want to listen to music, call friends, plant flowers, and sleep without jolting awake. I'm not asking for more, just the right to be at peace for the rest of my life. The room was so quiet I could hear the first drops of rain against the window. Harper reviewed the file one last time, then lifted her head and spoke clearly, each word like a stamp. The court orders. A protective order of 3 years is granted to Mrs. Clara Hensley. Mr. Caleb Hensley is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her and from contacting her by any means. Any violation results in immediate arrest. Mr. Caleb Hensley must complete a minimum 6-month anger management program. The gavel struck. Thud. It all ended with a dry, unexpectedly simple sound. Caleb froze, then turned away without a word. I didn't look after him. I only heard the rear door of the courtroom close. Graham rested a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "It's done, Clara." I nodded. No cheers, no bursting tears. Just one long breath, deep, full, and real. Marilyn squeezed my hand. "You did it. You told the truth, and the court listened." I looked at the two of them, then around the room I once thought I'd never have the courage to enter. When we stepped outside, the rain had just stopped. Water streaks on the steps caught the afternoon sun, reflecting three figures walking away: a lawyer, a social worker, and an older woman holding tight to a sheet of paper that would protect her. I wasn't joyful. I just felt lighter. I had survived, and I was still walking. At the courthouse threshold, I paused and looked up at the pale blue sky after rain. I said softly, just for myself, it wasn't justice that brought me back. It was the truth. And today, I dared to speak it. Then I walked down the steps, slow and steady, like someone relearning how to walk on her own legs. The weeks after the hearing passed in a quiet I thought I'd never have again. No more cars stopping suddenly at the gate, no more knocks that made my heart seize. Only ordinary sounds: crows on the porch, dry leaves brushing the roof, the drip of a leaky faucet. I began to love those sounds, as if they proved that real life had returned. Every morning I woke early, made coffee, and played soft music. Light streamed through the living room window and fell across the floor where I used to sit and cry for hours. Now, I laid out a few sheets of white paper and pulled out. My old watercolor set, the one I'd tucked away when Caleb moved in. I started painting again, fine strokes, gentle washes. The first painting was the backyard garden where the roses had begun to bloom after years of neglect. Each time the brush touched water, I felt my heartbeat ease and steady. I realized art wasn't just for beauty, it was how a strangled heart loosens. One afternoon, after the sun had faded, I checked the mailbox as usual. A few bills, a flyer, and an envelope with no return address. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single folded white sheet with a scrawl in ballpoint pen. "It's not over." The paper slipped from my fingers onto the porch. My heart pounded. I didn't need to guess that handwriting was Caleb's. I'd seen it hundreds of times on bills and notes he'd left on the table. I stood still for a few seconds, then went inside, locked the door, and grabbed my phone. I called 911, my voice shaky but clear. "This is Clara. Hensley. I have a 3-year protective order against my son. Today I received a threatening letter in his handwriting." The dispatcher reassured me and said a patrol would come to take a report. Graham arrived in half an hour. He examined the paper, put on gloves, and slipped it into a plastic sleeve. "Good, Clara. You didn't handle it much. The prints should be intact." "God," I whispered. "I thought it was over." Graham looked at me not just as a lawyer, but as a friend. "I know the feeling. But you did the right thing. This reaction calling right away shows you're living proactively now, not as a victim." That night, I sat on my bed without turning on the light. The door was locked, the curtains drawn, but I could still hear my heart pounding like a drum. Every sound outside made me tense. The baseball bat stayed under the bed, my phone fully charged, the flashlight on the nightstand. I kept telling myself, "I'm safe. There's police patrol. Everything has been logged." Sleep still didn't come. 2 days later, Ramirez called, his voice low and urgent. "Clara, we picked him up last night at a bar on 5th Street. He was drunk and loudly saying he'd make my mother pay. We have witnesses and video. You're safe for now." I dropped into a chair. In my head, I heard someone exhale. I wasn't sure if it was me or someone else. "You're sure?" "Sure. He's being held for 72 hours while we investigate the protective order violation and the threats. After I hung up, I looked out the window at the drizzle. I thought I'd feel relief, but what came was emptiness. Caleb had once been the baby in my arms, the child who giggled at bedtime stories. Now he was the man police had to cuff for threatening his own mother. That feeling loss and release at the same time cut both ways. That afternoon, Graham called again. "Clara, I know you feel empty. But remember, Caleb made his choices. You only protected." I was quiet for a while, then said, "I know. But sometimes understanding it with my head doesn't mean my heart catches up." "True. But your heart will relearn just like you relearned how to breathe." 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him. I didn't attend, but Graham did and reported back. Caleb received 8 months in jail for violating the protective order, plus making threats against someone's life. He was also ordered to complete anger management and mandatory psychological treatment after release. When I heard, I just nodded. Not happy, not sad. Just a slow calm spreading like a lake after a hard rain. I knew justice can't fix everything, but at least it can stop the cycle. Marilyn stopped by that afternoon. She set a small notice on my table. "The community center is starting a support group for survivors. You should join. They need to hear your story, and you need to hear theirs." I hesitated, then agreed. So every Tuesday afternoon, I went to the center. A small room, beige walls, chairs in a circle. Some were young, some older, some with fresh purple marks at their wrists. When it was my turn, I spoke no crying, no shaking, just told it. About fear, about the mirror that no longer showed me, about the judge's gavel. When I finished, a young woman beside me took my hand. "Thank you, I don't feel alone anymore." That night, I came home and looked at my half-finished rose painting. I picked up the brush and added a few highlights, new petals blooming in the corner. For the first time, I realized my life was being repainted too. The next week, Marilyn held a personal safety skills training for the group. I went and learned how to recognize stalking, preserve digital evidence, and use a safety code when calling the police. I learned to create strong passwords, turn on two-factor authentication, and delete old accounts Caleb might know. At one point, I laughed. Turns out a 69-year-old woman can learn cybersecurity like a college student. Marilyn smiled softly. "You're not just learning, you're taking back control." Those sessions made me feel more confident. Each small step, jotting down a strange license plate, sending a report email, checking the door locks, was a reminder I wasn't helpless anymore. One evening, after locking up, I stood on the porch and looked at the block. Everything was wonderfully ordinary, Mrs. Ellison's porch light, soft music from a neighbor's house, a dog barking down the street. I understood that healing isn't a single bright moment. It's a string of repeated choices, choosing to get up, choosing to trust, choosing to keep going. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and lay down. In the dark, the soft tick of the clock no longer scared me. Each little beat was a beat of freedom. I smiled and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll paint again. Maybe this time I'll paint the sky." And as my eyes closed, I knew I had truly started to live again. On the first morning of that spring, I stood in the living room, the room that had seen me bow and apologize for things that weren't my fault. Sunlight slanted through the window, drawing long beams across the tile. I looked around and decided it was time to repaint. I chose pale peach, the pink touched with orange that looks like dawn on a wall after rain. As I rolled on the first coat, the sweet, sharp smell of new paint spread, making me cough lightly and warming my chest at the same time. Each pass of the roller covered old marks, places once dented by a fist, cracks from a rage. Now those walls held a different breath, mine. When I finished, I stepped back to admire it. The afternoon light bounced off the peach and onto Evan's framed photo, making his face look like it held a smile. I said softly, "Do you see it? I finally brought light back into this house. I turned Caleb's room into a studio. not to erase him, but to rewrite the memory. I spread an old drop cloth over the floor, set an easel by the window, threw the curtains wide for the breeze. On the wall, I hung roses, skies, and one unfinished piece I titled Reclaiming. Every added brushstroke was me taking back a piece of myself that had been squeezed into silence. One afternoon, while clearing an old drawer for supplies, I found a stack of bank statements Graham had told me to review. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. The more I read, the deeper my frown. There were small, regular withdrawals, $100, $200 from my retirement account, labeled for Caleb. I didn't remember agreeing to them all. When I totaled it, the final number made my hand stop. $4,972. It wasn't just money. It was the proof of years I'd been controlled without noticing. I called Graham and told him. He listened and said simply, "We'll file a civil claim for reimbursement." He may not have the money to pay, but it's symbolic, a clear message that Clara Hensley is silent no more. I thought a moment, then nodded. "Do it, Graham. I want the rest of the world to know I stood up." A few weeks later, when the paperwork went out, I felt like a chapter had closed. Not because I wanted to win, but to prove that I existed and that my existence had value. I started attending senior yoga at the community center. The first time I bent forward, my knees ached, my back popped, and I laughed. "This body has taken a lot of hits, but it still knows how to stand back up," I told the instructor. She laughed too and squeezed my hand gently. After a few weeks, I slept better. My breathing slowed, and I woke without that heaviness in my chest. My body was learning how to live again. So was I. Marilyn visited on a quiet afternoon. She brought an envelope and her gentle smile. "We have something for you," she said, opening it to reveal a white certificate with a blue border. Certificate of Survivor Recovery, awarded to Clara Hensley for resilience, courage, and healing. I stared at it, feeling a current run through my heart. Tears came, but they weren't bitter. Smiling through them, I said, "This is the first certificate I've received that only proves I'm still alive." Marilyn took my hand. "And living in your own way." That night, I set the certificate on my desk beside Reclaiming. The lamp lit the word Survivor. I read it again and again until my throat tightened. I started volunteering at the shelter women in the very first days of fleeing abuse. My tasks were small: make breakfast, brew coffee, tidy rooms, and sometimes share my story when someone wanted to hear it. Each time I spoke, some women cried, some stared at me, surprised that someone so calm had lived through hell. I told them, "We're not weak. We just had to be strong alone for too long. Now it's time to learn a different strength, asking for help." A young woman once asked me, "Do you regret reporting your son?" I was quiet for a moment, then answered, "What good is regret if the price is your life?" Real love doesn't require silence to survive. My son chose his path. I only chose to live. Every time I left the center, I felt lighter. By telling the story, I was opening a door for others to step through. I learned something new too: how to say no and how to say I need help. Before I worried about burdening people, afraid I'd be judged as weak. Now I know loving myself isn't selfish. When I say no to what harms me, I'm saying yes to peace. Every night I journaled. Not much, just a few lines, but it became a habit. I wrote down small things. Today I poured coffee without spilling. I laughed looking at Evan's old photos. I slept 5 full hours without a scary dream. At the bottom of each page, I wrote the same line: "Don't go back to the dark." It wasn't just a reminder, it was a vow. One weekend evening, I invited Nora and Mrs. Ellison for dinner. Not a big party, just lasagna, a little salad, and a bottle of red wine I'd been saving. I put fresh roses in the center of the table and played soft music. When they arrived, sunset still lingered in the window frames, tinting the house a warm gold. Nora hugged me tight. "This house looks different, Clara. It has life." I smiled. "It only reflects the person living in it." We ate and talked, told old stories, sometimes laughing until we cried. When I poured the wine, my hand didn't shake. I realized I was no longer afraid of the clink of glasses or a man's loud laugh. No memory held this meal captive anymore. After dinner, Nora helped me wash the dishes while Mrs. Ellison watered the garden. When everything was done, I looked at them, two women who had once witnessed my collapse, now witnessing my recovery. I spoke softly, almost like a confession. There was a time I lived only to be afraid. Now, I live to be grateful. Nora smiled and laid a hand on my shoulder. And to teach others how to stand up. I smiled and looked out the window. Night had fallen, and the moonlight reflected off the pale peach walls I had just painted. No more shadows in the corners, only light, gentle, honest, and mine. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In a room filled with laughter, I could hear my own heartbeat again, calm, slow, steady. I knew this was no longer the house where I had been imprisoned. This was where I got to live for real. I began that morning by spreading the old ivory tablecloth, the very table where I had been humiliated, shouted at, made to feel like nothing. But today, it was different. Today, this table would become a table of freedom. I wiped every corner clean and set white roses in a glass vase at the center. I chose the crystal wine glasses Evan had bought for our 50th anniversary. I hadn't dared bring them out for a long time because in this house, beautiful things had once become excuses for contempt. Now, I wanted to return them to their original worth. In the kitchen, herb-roasted chicken filled the air with warmth, the scent of happiness and peace. I seasoned with salt, added a few sprigs of rosemary and slices of lemon, then brushed on a little honey to crisp the skin. The oven ticked, signaling the time had come. While I waited, I prepared a tray of vegetables: carrots, squash, potatoes, simple and comforting. Last was my mother's chocolate cake, the recipe I hadn't made since she passed. I set everything on the table: the roast chicken in the middle, bright vegetables alongside, the fragrant cake at the end. Candlelight shimmered through glasses of red wine, and light danced across the pale peach walls. The house felt warm, no heavy footsteps, no sharp breaths of fear, only the quiet breath of peace. Right at 7 o'clock, guests began to arrive. Marilyn came, first the same steady smile, now lighter. She brought a bouquet of sunflowers. "Flowers for those who keep their heads high," she said. I hugged her and whispered, "And for those who no longer bow." Graham arrived next, as put together as always, but softer in the face. "I brought something lawyers rarely bring: wine, not paperwork," he said, lifting a bottle of Bordeaux. Nora and Mrs. Ellison came together, hand in hand like old friends. Nora carried a basket of fresh, crusty bread, and Mrs. Ellison brought a mint teapot. "For ending dinner, not starting an argument," she joked, making me laugh. Lastly, 3 women from the community book group, the ones I'd met through Marilyn's support circle. They had once come to the shelter seeking refuge. Now they were starting over. One had just gotten a job at the library. One was about to move into her own place, and the other was still in therapy. I wanted them here, because this dinner wasn't only for me, it was for everyone who had walked through the dark and was still standing. The house filled with voices, soft laughter humming like background music. When everyone sat down, Graham looked around the table and raised his glass. To Clara, someone who didn't just survive, but bloomed. The table went quiet for a few seconds. Then glasses clinked. I smiled, eyes wet. "If anything bloomed, it's because you were the light that helped me sprout again." Marilyn leaned in, her voice warm. "Clara, you chose to live, to fight, to heal. Many come here to be rescued, but you rescued yourself. That's extraordinary." I went still. Her words drifted through the room and touched each person around the table. I looked from face to face, each one reflecting their own story, scars and pain, but also light. I spoke, small but sure. For years, I waited for someone to save me. Then one day, I understood no one was coming. If I wanted to live, I had to be the one to walk out of that. I kept waiting to be loved while I didn't dare love myself. Saving yourself isn't selfish, it's the first act of love. Nora nodded, eyes shining. Clara, I've never seen you stronger. When you turn pain into compassion, you don't just live, you give others life. The candles whispered. The roast chicken scented the air. I invited everyone to eat. The soft ring of cutlery on plates rose up familiar, but with a different note. Not the sound of a forced meal, but of a life chosen. Graham told a few funny stories about cases he'd won. Mrs. Ellison chimed in with a tale about a neighbor who planted a tree without the HOA's permission, and the whole table shook with laughter. One of the book club women, Margaret, shared about her first job interview after divorce. I was so nervous I called the interviewer officer instead of HR director. Everyone burst out laughing. That laughter, natural, full, unforced, caught in my throat. It was a sound I had lost and just found again. After the main course, I brought out the chocolate cake. My mother's recipe, I said. She always said the best cake is made with shaky hands and a steady heart. Graham grinned. Then it must be excellent tonight. I sliced the cake and served each piece. When the last slice hit a plate, Marilyn looked at me and said softly, Clara, you've come full circle, from pain to peace. But the best part is, you didn't stop at surviving, you chose to love life again. I was quiet, lifting my eyes to the candlelight. I think surviving is a blessing, but loving life after it has crushed you, that's the miracle. Outside, the sky was clear and full of stars. A night breeze carried the scent of roses through the window. In the kitchen, dishes clinked as everyone helped clean up ordinary sounds I once feared, now pleasant. I leaned in the doorway, watching them, listening to their laughter, and felt a sudden swell in my chest. The house that had been a cage was now a refuge. The pale peach walls reflected the soft candlelight as if they were cradling every bit of laughter. I whispered, not sure to whom, life has returned. When everyone left, I walked them to the gate. Mrs. Ellison turned back and hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, Clara. Tonight you didn't just host a dinner, you held a ceremony for your own soul. I smiled, eyes damp. Thank you for planting the seed that day. No, you're the one who made it bloom. When the gate closed, I went back inside. The kitchen still held the scent of cake, wine, and human warmth. I looked at the table now, washed with moonlight through the window, and felt an odd, clear peace. I sat, poured a little leftover wine, lifted my glass, and whispered to myself, to peace, to those who walked through the dark, to me. I set the glass down and looked outside. Deep down, I truly wished Caleb peace. Not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry hate any longer. Forgiveness, I now understood, isn't about erasing the past. It's about freeing yourself from its chains. That night when I went to bed, I looked at the door. The lock was still there, but I didn't slide the bolt. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't need to. For the third time in my life, I slept without locking the door. A small act, but a big moment. And before I drifted off, I knew I had truly returned to life, to the light, to myself. I began each morning with a small ritual, a hot cup of tea, sunlight spilling onto the porch, and a leather-bound journal waiting on the table. On the first page, written in blue ink, it says, 3 things I'm grateful for today. It's a habit I learned in group therapy. And for almost a year now, my first line has always been the same. 1. I'm grateful for myself. I'm grateful for the woman who didn't give up on those nights when there seemed to be nothing left to believe in. Grateful for these hands shaking but still opening the door to step into the light. Grateful for this heart cracked but still brave enough to love life again. Second, I usually write, I'm grateful for this home. Because now it's no longer a prison. It's a place of peace, of morning music, of the lavender I just replanted on the porch. And third, I'm grateful for the people who walked with me: Marilyn, Graham, Nora, Mrs. Ellison, and the women I met at the shelter. Each is a piece of the mosaic of my return. Now I keep a new rule: clear boundaries, kindness with limits. I've updated my security system, saved emergency numbers, and set up a camera at the front door. But more important are the invisible fences, emotional boundaries. I no longer apologize for needing quiet. I no longer accept things just to keep others comfortable. Boundaries, I've learned, aren't distance. They are the outline of self-respect. Every week I still go to the shelter not as someone in need, but as the woman who leads the craft class. I named the workshop From Fear to Creating. We cut paper, mix colors, knit. Some hands shake so much they can barely hold scissors, but the cuts get steadier. I tell them, our voices were taken for a while, but when we make something, even a small card, we're saying, I exist. One session, a young woman came up to me, eyes red. Mrs. Clara, I don't know when I'll ever feel as at peace as you. I smiled and held her hand. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes little by little, every time you choose yourself over fear. The civil case is still moving forward. Graham updates me often. He says that even if Caleb can't fully repay, the court accepting the case is already a win. The money may never come, he said, but your dignity is back where it belongs. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want acknowledgement that I'm not weak, not controlled. This time the courthouse isn't only where justice is carried out, it's where my passage through is affirmed. On the front porch, I replanted lavender, the flower Evan loved. Years ago, it withered from neglect. Now, as I turn the soil, the scent drifts through the breeze, sweet and clean. Every morning I water it and watch each stem reach up. A neighbor passing by said, "That looks beautiful, like it's brand new." I smiled. It's not new, just given a chance to bloom again, like me. One evening, I opened my journal and wrote a letter to myself from 7 years ago. Clara, from 7 years ago, I know you're afraid. I know you think silence will keep the peace. But silence doesn't save anyone, it only makes the dark bigger. One day, you will stand up. You will find people who believe you, and more importantly, you will believe yourself again. When that day comes, you'll see. You were never weak. You were made to forget your strength. Forgive yourself for taking so long to see it. Clara of today. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, the one that used to hold bills and painful papers. Now it holds the memory of someone who survived and is living well. The next morning, when the first light came through the window, I looked around the house, everything bathed in sunlight. I understood something I couldn't have 7 years ago. Freedom isn't a destination. It's a habit. Freedom is making tea without hearing a shout. Freedom is opening a window without fearing footsteps. Freedom is laughing without looking around first. And freedom is choosing, each day, to live a little more with gratitude and courage. I set a pitcher of lemonade in the center of the table like Evan and I used to do whenever we had company. But today, it wasn't for people who scared me, it was for friends who made me feel warm. I added a few mint leaves, and the fresh scent spread through the room. This house once witnessed my collapse. Now it witnesses my return. I went out to the porch, sat in the wicker chair, watched the wind move through the lavender, and listened to children laughing next door. In that moment, I gently closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said to myself softly, just loud enough for the breeze to hear, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free. If someone asked me now, what changed your life? I wouldn't say the law or the help. I would say, it was a choice on an ordinary morning when I decided not to endure anymore. Freedom, I learned, begins with a small choice, the choice not to be silent, and I know someone hearing this today may be in a dark room like I once was. I only want them to hear one thing. The light doesn't disappear. It's just waiting for you to open the door. Thank you for staying with me to the very last lines. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe a small kitchen that smells like morning coffee, or a quiet room late at night. But if anything I've said made your heart stir even once, please leave me a small sign, a comment, a hello, or simply the name of the city where you live. Because somewhere out there, someone might read it in silence and find the faith to begin again. If this story touched you, please tap like or subscribe. So when the next stories of courage, healing, and freedom are told, you'll be there again like an old friend returning. Every comment you leave is a small light for those still lost in the dark. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here, for listening, and for still believing that freedom, even late, always finds its way home.
I had just dropped my husband off at the airport when my 8-year-old son, Liam, suddenly grabbed my hand so hard it broke the skin around my nail. His eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. "Mom, we can't go home. Dad said tonight you and I will disappear. And he has to go far away so no one will suspect him." My heart stopped. I knelt down, held his little shoulders, and tried to steady the breath breaking apart in my chest. He had never lied, never trembled like this. But what made my spine turn cold wasn't Liam's words. It was the tone notification from my husband's text. "Go home as soon as you're done. Tonight is very important." Important? Important for whom? And for what? I realized this was no longer a normal day. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I am Avery Morgan, recently turned 58, living in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, a place I once believed held nothing but peace, late afternoon sunlight, and the sound of children playing in the cul-de-sac. I had just dropped my husband Darius at the departure terminal of Charlotte Douglas Airport. He said it was only a 2-day business trip, one of the many he had taken over the past few years. I held Liam's hand, planning to head back to the parking lot, go home, heat up the chicken soup still sitting in the pot, and try to finish off a long day. But Liam's eyes froze. My steps. He wasn't playful, wasn't chatty, wasn't talking about school like usual. He stood still as if a spotlight had pinned his fear in place, his tiny hand squeezing mine until it hurt. "I heard Dad talking on the phone this morning," Liam whispered, staring at the floor as if trying to recall every word. "Dad said he needs to clear the house, no more obstacles, so we can start over." I listened, but couldn't make sense of it. Each word felt like a rock sliding down a mountain, crashing into the next, sending a violent rumble through my chest. Liam had never said anything like this. He was a sensitive child, observant but never one to make things up. I wanted to reassure him, to believe he misunderstood. But the fear in those brown eyes wasn't something an 8-year-old could fake. I tried to smile, though my voice shook slightly. "You must have misheard, Liam. Your dad makes work calls all the time." He shook his head immediately, sharp, decisive, painful enough to make my heart clench. "No, Mom, I heard right. Dad said tonight you and I will disappear. Dad said he has to go far away so no one will suspect him." My chest burned as if someone had poured boiling water inside it. I opened my phone by reflex, and that moment sent a chill through me. Darius's text had just arrived. "Go home as soon as you're done. Tonight is very important." Important? Important for whom? Important for what? I tried to swallow, but my throat felt packed with dust. For months I had felt something was off with Darius, but I pushed it aside, like a woman trained her, whole life to endure, to keep a marriage steady, the way women of my generation were taught to preserve a family. He started locking his phone, coming home late, blaming endless meetings, strange calls in the middle of the night that he took outside on the porch, whispering, his hand trembling, though he'd smile thinly at me. "Don't worry, it's work." I wanted to ask Liam more, but my throat wouldn't let sound out. I squeezed his hand and pulled him toward the parking lot. I could not let anyone in the airport see how badly I was shaking. "Liam," I said once we were inside the car, "you remember everything clearly?" He nodded without hesitation. "Dad also said they have to do it quickly tonight, because starting tomorrow, Dad will be free." Free. That word struck my mind like a metal bell. I started the car but didn't drive toward home. By an instinct I didn't know I had, I turned the opposite way onto the highway. I needed space. I needed time. I needed to know whether I was afraid of something real or scaring myself. But then my phone lit up again and again. Darius sent 3 more messages. "Are you on your way home yet?" "Why aren't you answering?" "Don't drive around. Go straight home." The tone of those texts was wrong, urgent in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. Darius was usually indifferent toward me. He had forgotten anniversaries, birthdays, everything. He never cared whether I got home on time. I began to tremble. "Mom," Liam whispered, "if we go home tonight, you won't wake up." I had lived long enough to know when a child's fear was real, and a mother's fear, sharp as a knife, forces belief whether she wants it or not. I turned into a residential street 3 blocks from our house. The oak trees cast shadows across the windshield. The quiet was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. I shut off the lights, pulled the sunshade down, and looked at Liam. "Baby, I believe you, but we need to see with our own eyes to be sure." "No, Mom," Liam grabbed my arm immediately. "Don't go near the house. Dad isn't Dad anymore." I didn't know which hurt more, that sentence or the possibility that I had slept beside someone who saw our lives as disposable. I exhaled slowly. "We won't go inside. We'll stay far, just to observe, okay?" Liam hesitated, then nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. I held his hand while driving the long way around to the back street, where the roof of our house could be seen through the trees, but our car stayed hidden. I parked under 2 tall pines, a patch of complete darkness, just a few hundred feet from home, but far enough to avoid being spotted. I turned off the engine, turned off everything. Silence swallowed us. "We'll wait here for a bit," I whispered. "I just want to be sure. Then we'll figure out our next step." Liam leaned against me, trembling. I wrapped my arm around him, holding him close. I once believed I knew everything about life, marriage, safety, trust, but sitting in that old SUV on a dark street behind our house, I felt every belief in my life begin to fracture. Minutes ago, I was an ordinary wife, an ordinary mother. Now, I was a woman praying that what I was about to witness wasn't real, but my intuition, the one I had buried for years, told me things were worse than I imagined. I looked at the clock. 10:04 p.m. Wind brushed against the car windows. Liam held his breath, staring out into the night, his eyes wide as if trying to pierce the darkness for answers. I did not know that in just a few minutes, my life and my son's life would change forever. What I was about to see would not only destroy the home I had built, but reveal the true face of the man I had once vowed to spend my life with. And this was only the beginning. The darkness swallowed the quiet street where I parked. I sat still, letting the cold night air seep through the cracked window, numbing my skin. From the back seat, Liam leaned gently against my shoulder. He didn't speak, but I could feel his quick, shallow breaths. A child's fear never lies. It's so real, adults should feel ashamed for not believing sooner. And in that heavy silence, memories reopened like pages, sharp and unforgiving. I began recalling the recent months, the strange signs that appeared piece by piece, like shards of glass I had stepped over without looking. Darius used to be carefree with his phone, leaving it in the kitchen all day. But recently, he changed passwords constantly, even tilting the screen away from me so I couldn't see. When I jokingly asked, "What are you hiding?" he snatched the phone from me so fast it startled me. His eyes darkened for a split second before returning to their usual calm. "Avery, don't pry into my work. It's not good for you." "Not good for me? Why me?" I laughed it off, like a wife who had learned to keep peace at all costs. But that sentence stayed with me like a thorn under skin. Then one day, he placed a stack of documents in front of me. "Sign these. Tax laws changed. Putting all assets under one name is easier." I stared at him. We didn't have a huge estate, but it wasn't small. The house, the SUV, my retirement account, Liam's savings fund. "Why in your name?" I asked. Darius smiled easily, patting my shoulder like I was a child. "I do everything for this family, Avery. You trust me. Trust. I had trusted him for 10 years. Trusted until trust turned blind. I signed, not out of confidence, but out of exhaustion. When you live with someone who dominates every conversation, sometimes you sign just to avoid another argument. A few weeks later, Darius announced, "I increased your life insurance policy to $2.8 million, just to be safe." Safe. He said it casually, like he was talking about an oil change or checking the gutters. I stood, frozen on the kitchen step, dish towel in hand, water dripping to the floor. Why me? Why not his policy? Why that amount? But again, I stayed silent. Women my age often choose peace over confrontation. I buried the discomfort deep inside, until tonight, when that discomfort returned as a warning. Liam had tried to warn me earlier. He told me about strange men standing outside our home at night, one wearing a baseball cap, watching the house until he noticed movement inside. I dismissed it. "Probably a delivery driver, sweetheart." Liam shook his head. "But he stayed a long time, Mom, like he was waiting." I should have listened. 3 months ago, during dinner, Darius suddenly said, "Avery, I'm not saying this to scare you, but if anything ever happens, don't dig." I thought he meant risky business deals. Now, sitting in the shadows of this side street, that sentence sounded like a threat. Don't dig? He expected silence. I looked at Liam, my 8-year-old boy with messy brown hair and wide, alert eyes, who saw what I refused to see. The man I married was not the man I thought he was. I held his hand, cold and trembling. "Tell me again," I whispered. "You're sure about everything you heard?" Liam nodded firmly. "Dad said they would do it tonight. Dad said he has to go far away so the police won't suspect him. Dad said, we're a burden." I closed my eyes. A burden. 2 words that cut deeper than any knife. The clock read 10:21 p.m. We sat silently, only the wind through the trees and our breathing filled the air. Each minute stretched painfully long. Liam stayed close, his eyes fixed on our house. He looked older than 8 in that moment. Fear ages children in ways adults can't understand. Darius had stopped texting, but the silence was worse than the messages. It felt like the quiet before an explosion. Then headlights swept across the trees. Liam and I stiffened. A black SUV, no front license plate, crept into the neighborhood. Not a neighbor's car, not a delivery truck, not anything familiar. It moved slowly, as if counting each house. Then it stopped, right in front of ours. Liam gripped my hand until it burned. "Mom, they're here." My breath caught in my throat. In that moment, every faint sign I had ignored snapped together into a complete picture, a pitch black, freezing picture. Darius had been preparing this for a long time. Every detail, every signed paper, every action, every word, all of it led to tonight. And when the two dark-clothed figures opened the SUV doors, I knew that if it hadn't been for Liam's whisper at the airport, we would have become two names in an investigation report. Mother and child died in a house fire caused by faulty wiring. They didn't know we were watching. They didn't know Darius's plan had veered off course. But I knew, with a painful cutting clarity, my life would never be the same again. The black SUV stopped in front of my gate as if it had found the exact address for a mission planned long ago. I lowered myself into the seat, wrapping my arms around Liam's head, my heart pounding like hammer blows inside my chest. In the thick darkness, both car doors opened at the same time. Two men stepped out. They were dressed entirely in dark clothing, hoods pulled low over their faces. They didn't act sneaky like people trying to break in. No, they moved like men doing familiar work, precise, instructed, routine. One of them walked straight to the front door, and then the thing that made me almost throw up on the spot happened. He took a key from his jacket pocket and opened my front door. No picking the lock, no forcing anything, no hesitation. He simply inserted the key, turned it, and walked in like a legal homeowner. My nails dug into my own skin hard enough to sting. I swallowed back the rising nausea. Only 3 people had keys to my house: me, Darius, and the spare key in his desk drawer, a place where I once heard him warn Liam, "Never touch this." There was no doubt anymore. Darius had given them the key. I looked at Liam through the darkness. His face was so pale it looked drained of blood. He gripped my hand, his voice trembling. "Mom, those are the 2 men from this morning. I recognize the way they stand." I didn't have time to ask anything else. Flashlights began sweeping inside the house, cold beams cutting across the windows, sliding along the walls like blades. I shivered. Never had my house, where I once hung our wedding photo, where I cooked late dinners, looked so terrifying. Just a few minutes later, a strange smell drifted out. At first it was faint, like burning plastic or motor oil, but it grew stronger, acrid, sharp, heavy, the smell of something flammable. I inhaled and nearly panicked. It was the same smell I'd caught when a neighbor cleaned out their storage using paint thinner, a smell that clings to the throat, raising goosebumps. The feeling of standing at the edge of a nightmare tugged me downward. "What are they doing?" I whispered to myself, though the answer had already flashed through my mind, clear and brutal. Liam whispered, his voice shrinking. "They're pouring something on the floor." Then the flashlights went out. A horrifying silence fell. I don't know how long each second lasted in that silence. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly hold the steering wheel. Then suddenly, a flare of orange light burst inside the house, like someone had lit a giant match. My mouth fell open, then a muffled pop. A burst of flames erupted in the living room, so bright I saw it reflected on Liam's face. Fire spread fast like it had been fed fuel, crawling across the carpet, licking the sofa, catching the curtains. Within seconds, my living room, where I had just drunk tea last night, became a roaring pit of fire. I opened the car door by instinct. No, my house! But Liam grabbed my leg, pulling me back into the seat, screaming in panic. "Mom, you'll die! Don't go out!" His cry hit me like a slap, snapping me back. If I ran out there, if I tried to go inside, I would burn to death at the doorway. I wrapped my arms around him, holding his head against me. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But I was the one shaking uncontrollably. The fire spread too fast, far too fast to be an accident. Within minutes, it swallowed the living room. Black smoke poured out of the windows, thick enough to smother the whole house. Small explosions followed, wood cracking, glass breaking, pieces of the ceiling falling. The flames surged as if assisted. This wasn't dry wood. This wasn't negligence. What had those men poured on the floor? How much? How long before we arrived? Neighbors started shouting. Porch lights flicked on across the street. Someone ran out with a phone to call 911. I watched the scene as if my legs no longer belonged to me. I loved that house. I had hung every picture on the wall, hand-placed every decal in Liam's room. All our memories were in there. But the fire didn't care. It climbed the stairs, then began licking into the second floor, where Liam's bedroom was. My whole body went cold. If I had listened to Darius and brought Liam home early, if we had gone to bed, if Liam hadn't said anything, we would have been up there, and we wouldn't have escaped. We watched the house collapse piece by piece through the windshield, silent, absolutely silent, quiet enough that I could hear my child's heartbeat. Then my phone vibrated. A familiar notification chimed in the smoke-filled air. I picked it up as if holding hot coals. A message from Darius, just a few words. "Sleep well, you two. Text me when you get home." It felt like a cold blade plunged into my chest. He knew we should be asleep. He believed we were inside. He believed the fire would take care of the rest. And now he was sending a message to create the perfect alibi, the caring, innocent husband. I read the text 3 times and still couldn't believe his audacity. I wanted to scream, throw the phone into the windshield, call him and ask if he had any conscience left. But I couldn't do anything. Liam looked up at me, eyes full of tears. "What did Dad say, Mom?" I couldn't lie to him anymore. I handed him the phone. He stayed silent for a very long time, then whispered, "Dad." Knew we would be sleeping in the house tonight. I pulled him into my arms. I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears poured out uncontrollably, but even in that moment, one truth stood sharp in my mind. No doubts, no excuses, no hopeful denial left. Darius tried to kill us, with planning, with calculation, with every step prepared. He wanted to start a new life, without me, without Liam. He wanted freedom, wanted to erase his debts, wanted to live comfortably off my life insurance payout. And if Liam hadn't tugged my hand at the airport, if I hadn't listened, if I had driven home on time, then right now we would be lying inside that burning house. No breath, no voice, no chance. I watched the second floor collapse, the sound of splintering wood like a cry. Black smoke rose into the sky, and the flames reflected on the windshield, painting my face in red as if exposing the truth directly to me. That night, inside the darkness of the SUV, I knew I had stepped out of my old life. I was no longer the wife who tried to preserve happiness by staying silent. From now on, I had only one mission: protect Liam and uncover the truth Darius thought he had burned in those flames. When the second floor caved in, the cracking wood and shattering glass roared through the car windows. It felt like a part of me broke too. It wasn't just a house. It was my last 10 years. The photos, the blanket I crocheted for Liam when he was 3, the old handwritten letters from my parents, all turned to ash. Fire engine sirens grew louder, then flooded the neighborhood, red and blue lights flashing across the rearview mirror like a nightmare pulsing. Neighbors ran out. Some rushed toward the gate of my house, others recording, some covering their mouths in shock. I ducked low in my seat, pulling Liam's head down. "Don't look up, baby," I whispered. "No one can know we're here." He nodded, pressing his face into my shoulder. I felt his hot tears through my coat. My first instinct, like many Americans, was to call the police, to run to the firefighters and scream, "My husband did this! He tried to kill us!" But as soon as the thought appeared, the little bit of logic I had left crushed it. Darius was not a nobody. He was the successful man of the neighborhood, the guy who funded the local youth team, chaired church fundraisers, attended uptown Charlotte charity dinners. He had pictures with the police chief hanging at City Hall. He smiled in the local paper, labeled a proud black businessman of the region. And who was I? A middle-aged wife who had stayed home for years, recently working part-time at a small shop. No money, no power, no voice. I looked down at my phone. The only evidence I had was one message. "Sleep well, you two. Text me when you get home." That message, if presented, would be read as what? A husband checking on his family, nothing more. And the testimony of an 8-year-old, "Dad said we would disappear." Against Darius's expensive attorney and his polished reputation, I could already hear their argument. "Your Honor, this is simply a frightened child imagining things after a traumatic fire." I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. We had nothing. If I showed up now, Darius could flip the entire story, paint me as an unstable wife, imagining threats after losing her home. I had seen too many cases like that on the evening news. No, I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I wiped my tears, turned fully toward the back seat, held Liam's shoulders, and made him look into my eyes. "Listen to me, Liam. From this moment on, we don't let anyone know we're alive. No neighbors, no friends, no one at all. Do you understand?" His lips trembled, but he still nodded. I just need you," he whispered, "as long as you're here." That sentence squeezed my chest tight. I pulled him into my arms again, took a deep breath, then backed the car out of the dark space between the 2 pine trees. I had to get away before the fire truck lights swept toward where we were. I drove like someone sleepwalking, turning through familiar curves that suddenly felt strange tonight. I avoided the main roads, sticking to small streets, weaving through other neighborhoods. Charlotte at night was gentle like a tired animal. Warm porch lights, seasonal decorations, flags hanging by doorways, all of it the complete opposite of the panic rolling in my chest. Liam began to drift off in the back seat, his head nodding with each bump. The child had just escaped death less than an hour ago. No child should ever have to go through a night like that. I couldn't keep driving without a destination. I needed a place. I needed a name. I needed a hand I could hold when the world had just collapsed under my feet. And then, like someone flipped a switch in my mind, I remembered my father. Not the father of today. The father from years ago, before he died of a heart attack, before his knees gave out, before he sat in the recliner in my living room and said something I had laughed off at the time. If one day you are truly in danger, go find Carlton Rao. Back then, I answered, "Dad, you watch too many detective shows." He laughed, but his eyes weren't joking. He opened his wallet, took out a small piece of paper with a phone number and 2 lines. Carlton Rao, attorney, and an address in the Midwood area. He folded it and pressed it into my hand. "I don't trust Darius," he said quietly. "I hope I'm wrong, but if one day something feels off, you call this. Don't ask much, just call." I had kept that paper in my wallet in the compartment I rarely touched. For years, every time I cleaned my wallet, I found it, shook my head, and said, "Dad worries too much." I never thought the day would come when that paper would be the only lifeline I had. Now, in the middle of the night, on an empty road, I switched on the car light and opened my wallet with shaking hands. Receipts, membership cards, old photos of Liam, and then, in a small back pocket, the yellowed paper. My father's handwriting was still clear, leaning slightly to the right. Carlton Rao, attorney with a phone number and an address. I stared at it for a long moment. I felt split in two. One half wanting to throw the paper away and pretend none of this had ever happened. The other half knowing that if I didn't dial this number, I might not live long enough to regret it. I chose the second, half. My hands shook so badly I had to dial twice. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Each ring stretched out like a whole year. Just when I was about to hang up, a low, firm female voice answered. "Hello, Law Office of Rao." I stayed silent for a few seconds. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Hello, I'm Avery Morgan. My father is Dale Morgan. He used to..." The other end went quiet for half a beat. Then the woman's voice sharpened, alert now. "Dale's daughter? You finally called." A short pause. "I'm Attorney Rao, Carlton Rao. Avery, where are you right now?" My heart pounded. My father didn't just talk to this woman once. He had prepared more than I realized. I'm driving near downtown, my house. My house just burned down. My son and I almost... I couldn't finish. The next words tangled into strangled sobs. She didn't comfort me, didn't gasp, didn't panic. Her voice stayed steady, as if she was used to calls made in desperation. "Listen to me, Avery. Are you alone?" "I'm with Liam, my son." "Is your husband there?" I swallowed hard, answering with a hoarse voice. "No, he's on a business trip out of state. He's the one who wanted us dead." Again, she didn't interrupt or judge. I heard the scratch of a pen on the other end, like she was taking notes. "All right. Avery, listen carefully. Drive straight to the address I'm about to text you. My office is in Midwood. Do not stop anywhere. Do not visit anyone. Do not tell anyone where you're going. Put your phone on silent and absolutely do not call your husband. Clear?" Her tone wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Yes, I understand." "Good. I'll be waiting there. The door will be locked. Cameras are on. Ring the bell once. I'll open it. And Avery..." "Yes?" "You did the right thing by calling. Dale would be proud of you." I burst into tears the moment the call ended. The road to Midwood felt longer than usual. I merged onto the interstate, then back into smaller roads, following the map's directions. Liam dozed in the back, clutching the stuffed dinosaur he took everywhere. Charlotte drifted past the windows like a slow film. Drive-through restaurants still lit, a few cars at gas stations, neon billboards flickering. No one knew that inside an old SUV passing through, there was a woman who had just lost her home and her husband. Not by death, but by truth. Midwood at night was quieter than I remembered. The area was full of old brick houses, small coffee shops, and family-owned stores. The GPS guided me to a 2-story red brick building on a corner with a tiny brass sign, Rao and Associates, Legal Counsel. I parked by the curb. It was close to midnight. The building wasn't flashy like the law offices on TV. Only a warm yellow light glowed from a frosted window on the ground floor. A camera, pointed directly at the porch. The front door had 2 layers, a glass door with a steel latch inside and a heavy wooden outer door that looked sturdy enough to trust. All of that should have comforted me, but in the state I was in, it only made me feel like I was truly stepping into another world, the world my father had feared I'd one day face. I gently shook Liam. "Liam, wake up. We're here." He rubbed his eyes, looking around sleepily. "Where is this, Mom?" "A place where someone can help us." I took his hand and we climbed the steps together. My hand trembled as I pressed the doorbell. In less than 10 seconds, the lock clicked. The wooden door opened first, then the glass door inside. A woman in her early 60s stood there. Dark brown skin, silver hair pulled back neatly, glasses perched on her nose. She wore a dark sweater and jeans, nothing like the polished attorneys on television. But her eyes, sharp, awake, steady, made me feel small, like a child. "Avery?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." She glanced at Liam, still clinging into my hand, then opened the door wider. "Come in, quickly. Tonight is not a night to stand outside." Inside, the office was warm, smelling of strong coffee and old books. Files lined the walls. Stacks of papers covered her desk. Nothing fancy, but orderly and solid. She locked the door, tapped something on a control box near the wall, probably the security system, and gestured, "Lay the boy on that sofa. There's a blanket there. He needs to sleep, and you sit here." I did as instructed. Liam curled up the moment he lay down, exhausted. I covered him with the blanket, smoothed his hair, then returned to the chair across from the desk. Attorney Rao sat, clasped her hands, and looked directly at me. "All right, Avery, start talking. From the beginning. Don't leave out anything, even if it seems small." I took a deep breath, and I talked. I told her about the constantly changing passwords, about the property transfer papers for tax convenience, about the life insurance policy raised to $2.8 million with the words, "just in case," about the strangers Liam saw outside, about the line, "if anything happens, don't dig," about the phone call Liam overheard this morning, the whisper, "Tonight they will disappear." Then I told her about the airport, Liam's small hand squeezing mine until it bled, the decision not to go home, the black SUV, the key turning, the chemical smell, the flames bursting, and the final message, "Sleep well, you two." I didn't know how long I spoke. Some parts I had to stop to breathe, some parts broke into sobs. But she never interrupted. She listened, straight-backed, eyes steady, sometimes writing in her notebook. When I was done, the room fell silent. I could hear the wall clock ticking and Liam's slow breaths from the sofa. At last, Attorney Rao leaned back, exhaling long like she'd just finished assembling a puzzle she had suspected all along. "Your father had excellent instincts," she said slowly. "He came to see me about almost 4 years ago." I looked up, my heart jumping. My father came to see you." "Yes. He said he didn't trust your husband. He didn't have major evidence back then, just small things. The way Darius asked about your inheritance, the way he reacted when you wanted to go back to work. But Dale said, his exact words, 'I can't leave my daughter unprotected if something happens to me.'" She stood, walked to a short file cabinet, unlocked it, searched briefly, then pulled out a thick brown folder. She set it in front of me. On the cover, in handwriting, "Darius Morgan, confidential." Goosebumps rose along my spine. "Avery," Rao said, her voice dropping lower, "your father was right. I have a file on your husband." She paused, letting the words settle into the warm, coffee-scented room. "And I'm afraid this started much earlier than you think." The brown folder lay in front of me like it was glowing in the mixed smell of coffee and old paper. My fingers trembled on its edge. I had always thought my father was overly cautious, overprotective. But now, seeing the words, Darius Morgan Confidential, I just wanted to lean back and ask the sky, "How long had you known, Dad?" Attorney Rao pulled her chair closer, placing her hand on the folder, her voice steady like sharpened steel. "Avery, before Dale passed away, he came to me. He said he felt something was wrong, even if he couldn't name it. And he gave me this, with instructions. When she needs it, give it to her." She opened the folder. Thick, aged papers, some yellowed. The smell reminded me of my father reading newspapers in his tiny study. She pulled the first page out and set it before me. The title made my chest tighten. Financial Status Report, Darius Morgan. Not from a bank, not something he provided. This was from a private investigator. My father had hired someone to watch Darius. I stared at the page as if it were a mirror showing me the true state of my marriage. Columns of numbers, and it took me a few seconds to understand what I was reading. "This is debt?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "And hidden debt," Rao confirmed. "Not bank loans, not credit cards. This is gambling debt, debt from under-the-table dealings, debt paid in cash. Dale suspected it years ago, so he hired someone to follow him." She pointed to one line of notes. "Repeated short-term loans at Winston Club. Total of $180,000. I felt as if someone had poured stones over me. Darius wasn't just passionate about betting, like he used to say. He was buried in it. Buried so deep he couldn't pull himself out. Many other pages detailed failed investments, shady transactions, and finally, the thing that made me go numb. 2 years of contact with a local crime group to take care of the burden. I lifted my head, my lips so dry I had to wet them with my tongue. A burden? That means... Rao looked at me for a moment, her gaze neither avoiding nor softening the truth. "You and your son." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the chair. Liam was asleep on the sofa, blanket pulled to his chin, but just the thought of our names being called a burden made a burning pain run down my spine. Not because my husband wanted to kill me, but because he saw it as naturally as throwing away a broken object. I didn't know how long I was silent. When Rao continued, I realized my hands were clenched so tightly they had turned white. "This isn't all," she said, pulling out another stack of papers. "These documents track the money flow, especially the inheritance your mother left you." I leaned closer. That was the money I saved in our joint account, believing that spouses shouldn't hide things from each other. In the middle pages, it was written clearly, inheritance of $132,000. Withdrawn in 19 transactions, completely gone in 18 months. My heart felt like it had been punched. "Oh my God," I whispered. "He spent every dollar." I remembered asking Darius several times why our joint account was lower than usual. He always had an answer ready. Home repairs, future investments, work expenses. I believed him. I believed him because trusting your husband feels natural. Rao closed the file and spoke slowly, firmly. When that money wasn't enough, Darius turned to the only thing left that he could convert into cash, your life insurance policy. $2.8 million. She emphasized each word, was enough to clear the debt and start a new life, with someone new, without you, without Liam. I burst into tears, not the choked sobs from sitting in the car watching my house burn. This time, the tears poured out like they had waited a long time to escape my chest. Betrayal isn't one stab. It's 1,000 tiny needles piercing every memory, every family dinner. Every night I stayed up sewing his loose buttons. Every moment he lifted Liam and called him the light of my life. All of it turned into smooth lies. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking. Liam, sensing something, stirred and opened his eyes. He saw me crying, jumped off the sofa, and ran to me, wrapping his small but determined arms around my neck. "Mom, don't be scared. I'm here." That sentence, on that night, felt like a small hand gripping my soul tight. I held him close, kissing his hair. He didn't understand everything, but he sensed his mother's pain, and that made my anger burn hotter. Rao let us hold each other for a moment, then spoke. "Avery, now you need to stay calm and listen. You have a major advantage. You're alive. But that alone isn't enough to charge Darius. To end this, we need solid evidence. Actions, instructions, transactions, hired men. Everything must be strong enough to bring him to court without giving him room to turn it around." I wiped my tears, forcing my breath to steady. But where is the evidence? The fire burned everything. Rao shook her head. Not everything. Men like Darius are careful. They keep a portion for themselves in case the people they hired turn on them. In the old investigation notes, there was mention of a lock inside his desk. I cut her off, my heart tightening. The third drawer, on the right. I've seen him lock it, but I never had the key. That could be where he kept documents about the people he contacted. Notes, cash transaction records, a secondary phone, anything. And just one of those things is enough to turn the whole case. I looked at Rao, my mouth dry. "But the house burned down." "Fire burns wood faster than metal," she replied. "A small safe, a metal compartment, or a lockbox could still be intact. And even ashes can speak, Avery. People who stage a crime scene always leave mistakes. The issue is, we must get there before anyone else comes back to erase the evidence." Her meaning was so clear I felt nauseous. We had to go back to that pile of ashes. We had to find what Darius didn't have time to destroy. Liam was still holding my arm, watching me with worried eyes. I inhaled deeply, forcing myself to stay steady despite my racing pulse. "Rao, do you think we can do it?" She didn't answer right away. She folded the file, pushed it gently toward me, like handing over a piece of fate. "Avery," she said, her voice low but strong, "you are not just a victim. You are a survivor. You know better than anyone what's being hidden. You escaped a death he was certain of. You still have your son. The two of you witnessed what no one else saw." She looked straight at me. "If anyone can pull the truth out of those ashes, it's you." I held Liam's hand, squeezing it lightly. Yes, I was alive, and I was no longer alone. That night, in the small office in Midwood, with the hum of the air conditioner and the thick smell of coffee, I understood what my father had probably known for years. To save my child, I had to face the fire, this time with the truth. And the truth was in the place I once called home. I couldn't sleep that night. Even though my body was exhausted, my mind felt stretched like a tight string. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames climbing the walls, the two men entering the house with a key, the message from Darius lighting up the screen. Each image made my chest seize. Rao didn't force me to rest. She only said, as she handed me a warm glass of water, "Avery, tomorrow night we go back. Tonight he's still busy pretending. Tomorrow night the men he hired will think everything is done." I nodded. We had only one chance to find the evidence. If Darius returned to the scene before we did, he would erase everything. The next night, right on time, we stood at the edge of the small forest behind the houses, where a dirt path ran behind the neighborhood. A path I used only when taking Liam to collect pine cones. Now it was an escape route, a re-entry route, the only route without cameras. Rao led the way, short but solid, her steps firm on the fallen leaves. I held Liam's hand. His hand was so cold I had to rub it to warm it. The thin moonlight through the trees made the path look dusted with silver. "Mom, are you sure it's safe?" Liam whispered. "It's not safe, sweetheart, but it's necessary." I squeezed his hand. He didn't say anything else, just walked closer to me. He had grown up too much since that tragic night, too fast for an 8-year-old. We exited the trail and reached the fence behind my house. The floodlights from the firefighters were gone, and the police had left that morning. The house stood silent, blackened, burned down like an abandoned skeleton. The left wall had collapsed, part of the roof had fallen in, exposing a large gap into the second floor. But just as Rao predicted, Darius's office on the second floor hadn't completely fallen. A corner of the room remained, though the walls were scorched. Rao scanned the area, whispering, "Let's go, no one's watching now." We followed the fence and slipped through the smallest break. The burnt smell in the wind made me dizzy. I didn't know how I managed to walk back into the place that had almost killed me and my son, but my feet kept moving. The kitchen door was mostly charred. The frame tilted, pieces of wood falling as I pushed it lightly. We stepped inside, crunching over broken tiles and thick ash. The kitchen had once been where I taught Liam to make pancakes. Now it was just a pile of black debris. "Move fast," Rao said. "We have 15 to 20 minutes. There was no staircase left to reach the second floor, but part of the railing near the window remained, and the metal hooks still clung to the burnt wall. Rao brought a small climbing strap, something I didn't know why she owned and didn't dare ask. She tied the strap to the remaining wood, tested it several times, then nodded. "I'll go first. Avery in the middle. Liam last. I'll pull him up. Don't look down." I had never felt as weak as I did climbing that broken railing. Each step took both mental and physical strength. Ash slid under my hands. Wind blew through the open roof, carrying the smell of burnt metal and wood, like the night before was still smoldering. When we reached the second floor, the office appeared like a ghost. Darius's desk was burned from the top down, but the lower portion survived. The wall behind it was pitch black, the floor covered in ash, and in the middle of that charred wall was something that made me shiver. Darius's safe had been exposed, the wooden covering burned away, but the keypad still intact. Another thing chilled me. I'd always thought that safe was the most secure thing in the house. Now it sat uncovered like evidence against its owner. Rao signaled for me to hurry. I looked at the numbers, my hand trembling. The one code Darius had ever used, and confidently believed no one else knew, was his birth date. I typed it silently. Click. The safe door opened. Inside wasn't much, but enough to take my breath away. Bundles of cash wrapped in rubber bands, several SIM cards for untraceable calls, a black burner phone charred on one corner but intact, debt documents, some with burned edges but mostly readable. Rao quickly gathered everything into the fireproof bag she brought, checking each item. "This is only part of it," she said. "Darius definitely kept a backup somewhere else." Before I could react, Liam tugged my sleeve. "Mom, here." He pointed to the burnt floor. A square piece of wood sat slightly offset from the rest, easy to miss without looking closely. I knelt, brushed away the ash, and lifted the plank. Underneath was a hidden compartment. My heart tightened. All these years living with him, I never knew there was a secret space under his office. Inside were a rough, old brown leather notebook with lightly burned edges, a thick envelope filled with receipts and handwritten notes, a small memory card. Rao opened the notebook first. On the first page, Darius's familiar handwriting cut me like a blade. Plan. Resolve the burden before October. It felt like someone slapped me across the face. Every loving word, every promise, all looked like ash-covered lies now. Rao flipped through. The following pages listed service payments, initials of contacts, scheduled times for cleanup, deposit amounts, notes saying, make sure no evidence is left. My hands shook over the pages. Every stroke of ink pierced the last thin layer I used to shield him. He's just stressed. He's just different lately. He'll be better. No. He wasn't changing. He was revealing himself. Rao closed the notebook and looked at me, her gaze sharp but not cold. This is exactly what we need. But just as she finished speaking, a sound froze my blood. The front door being shoved open, then heavy footsteps on the burned floor. Someone's here, I gasped. Liam clung to my arm, trembling. Rao motioned for absolute silence, then whispered, "The cabinet over there, quick!" We slipped into a half-burned wooden cabinet in the corner. Only half the door remained, but the darkness hid us well. Ash swirled as I pulled Liam close. 2 male voices echoed, familiar ones, the same men who set the house on fire that night. The cops didn't find the bodies. The boss said to come back and check for anything left. No way, 2 people asleep inside, fire like that, they'd be gone. He said he's not convinced, told us to sweep the office again. The office. I let out a breath. My hand gripping Liam's shoulder so tightly, he turned his face up to me, as if trying to reassure me back. Their footsteps climbed the temporary stairs, the sound of breaking wood snapping under their weight. A beam of their flashlight swept across the room, only a few steps from the cabinet we were hiding in. I heard my heartbeat in my ears like a pounding drum. One of the men said, "Hey, the safe is open." "No way, we didn't touch it." "Someone got here first. Watch out. Maybe they're still alive." I held my breath. Rao stayed completely still like a statue. Liam pressed his face against my chest. One of the men's feet stopped right in front of the cabinet. I thought I was about to faint when, "Ah!" A loud scream came from the porch on the first floor. A woman's scream, sharp, chilling, not the scream of someone in danger, but a scream meant to warn. The 2 men jerked back. "Someone's downstairs! Go!" Their footsteps pounded down the stairs. The door slammed, then silence. Rao slowly cracked the cabinet door open. She was breathing hard, but her eyes were still razor sharp. "Move. Now. They'll come back." We rushed across the room and climbed down the rope just like we had come. I lowered Liam first, my arms numb, but my mind focused on only one thing. We had to get out. When my feet hit the ground, I turned to look at the house one last time. The blackened walls stood like witnesses to a crime. And also, the place where the truth had been pulled out of the ashes. Rao grabbed my arm, urging, "Run!" We ran through the trail and into the trees. Behind us, an engine started, and headlights swept across the area as if searching for something. If Rao hadn't yelled to distract them, we might not have had a chance to escape. When we reached the parking lot where she had left her car, I leaned against the door, gasping. Liam wrapped his arms around my waist, pressing his face into my stomach as if to make sure I was really still here. Rao started the engine, her voice strangely calm. "Avery, Tonight you found something most people never get the chance to hold, the truth. She glanced at the bag holding the notebook, the phone, the papers. And this truth will save both of you. I turned to look out the window, toward the pile of ashes swallowed by darkness, and I knew. From that moment on, I was no longer the woman who ignored the signs. I became the person who would peel apart every layer of lies Darius had built, using exactly what he left behind in that secret compartment he thought I would never find. By the time Rao drove us back to the office, it was already late. The city outside was quiet, but in my head, I still heard the fire, the breaking glass, and the cold words in the notebook. Resolve the burden before October. As soon as the office door locked behind us, Rao placed the fireproof bag on the table and looked at me. Now it's time to see what we really have. Liam was exhausted, crawling onto the sofa in the corner and curling up in the thin blanket. I pulled it up to his chest, kissed his forehead, then returned to the desk. Rao took each item out. The cash, the SIM cards, the burner phone burned on one corner, the stack of debt papers, and finally, the brown leather notebook. She opened it, and I sat across from her, no longer able to cry, but my heart tightening every time I saw Darius's familiar handwriting. The first page, plan, resolve the burden before October. Below it were short, clear lines. 5,000, deposit for M. 2,500, first payment for the handling team. Meet M at the parking lot behind the old gas station, 9 p.m. Rao turned to the next page. Each page looked like a detailed project plan. Dates, meeting locations, amounts paid, notes, keep quiet, avoid cameras. Nothing vague. Darius recorded everything as if he were managing a project, not hiring people to kill his wife and child. In the middle of the notebook, a line was underlined. Scenario, fire, the perfect accident. Under it were bullet points. Choose weekend. Neighbors pay less attention. Start fire in living room near outlet. Easy to blame electrical short. Make sure wife and kid are home. Use sleeping pills if needed. I fly to another state before 7 p.m. Have email confirmation witnesses. Return as grieving husband, father. The more Rao read, the colder I felt. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was a deliberate murder plan, handwritten and calculated step by step. On the page margin was a smaller line. Remind them. Leave no survivors. I swallowed hard. No more tears, only a raw sting in my chest. Rao flipped ahead. The last pages were short scribbles, messier, as if written in a hurry. Reconfirm insurance policy. Full payout if death by fire. The more the house burns, the fewer questions. Then the line that made my breath stop. The boy must go too. Don't leave problems behind. I stared at the 4 words, the boy must go, still irrationally hoping I had read wrong. But the words stayed there. Straight, clear, cold. Darius didn't just leave Liam to die in the fire. He planned for it, accepted it as part of the conditions. I inhaled, murmuring almost to myself, he wrote it down. Rao gently closed the notebook, pushed it aside, then picked up the burner phone. Now for the rest. She plugged the phone into her laptop. The device powered on despite the burned casing. After a moment, the message log appeared. Many unfamiliar numbers saved lazily as M, T, driver. Rao opened M. A string of short messages. Darius, do it fast and clean that night. No survivors. M. Just let them sleep. They won't know anything. Darius, check to make sure neighbors don't suspect. The closer to the day of the fire, the more specific it became. The message from the morning of the incident. Darius. Tonight. I fly at 7. Wait until they're asleep. No survivors, not even the boy. My throat tightened. It wasn't Liam's assumption. It wasn't a child overhearing. Darius had written clearly, not even the boy. Rao shut the screen so I wouldn't have to stare any longer. Legally, this is extremely serious, she said, but I want a criminal investigator to give his assessment. She made a call. I only heard fragments of it. She mentioned my father, mentioned evidence of a murder for insurance plan. About an hour later, a man arrived at the office. He introduced himself. I'm Hendrix Walker, private investigator, formerly with the State Investigative Division. Carlton told me about your case. He shook my hand, his eyes direct, his voice straightforward. Rao laid out the notebook, the debt papers, and the laptop, summarizing everything again. Walker read every line carefully. He didn't comment much, just nodded or frowned occasionally. Finally, he looked up. In terms of evidence, he said slowly, we have a handwritten plan, payment transactions to the hired group, messages showing clear intent to kill his wife and child. Context, the fire, his trip out of state, the high-value life insurance. He looked at me. With this, we can absolutely build a serious criminal case, not just at the state level. Federal involvement is possible because this includes insurance fraud and organized crime. I thought relief would come. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Tired because the evidence in front of me both helped me and shattered the image of the man I lived with for 8 years. Rao asked, "But there's still risk, right?" Walker nodded. Someone like Darius will hire an excellent lawyer. They'll say the notebook is just fantasy written under stress, no direct action taken yet. They'll try to separate him from the arsonists, argue that they acted beyond the agreement, claim he had never intended to kill his family. I cut in, my voice hoarse. But he wrote no survivors, not even the boy. Walker nodded. Yes, it's very strong, but a skilled lawyer will still twist it. Talk about threats from debt collectors, impaired judgment, psychological stress. If we only rely on documents and messages, there's enough gray area for them to create doubt. He leaned back, speaking clearly. What we need is a mistake from Darius himself, an action, a sentence, a reaction that shows he knew it was arson, knew it was planned, something he doesn't have time to polish. I looked at Rao. She stayed quiet as if she already knew what Walker would propose. How do we get that? I asked. Walker didn't circle around it. We make him reveal it. Not by confronting him openly with the police, but by letting him believe that you are still within his grasp. I frowned. What do you mean? Right now, Walker said, Darius sees 2 possibilities. 1, you and Liam are dead. Everything went according to plan. 2, he's starting to doubt it because there are no bodies and his men reported the safe was opened. When he becomes certain you're alive and have the documents, he'll panic. Panic makes people try to regain control, negotiate, threaten, manipulate, and the person he's been manipulating for years is you. I started to understand. A wave of discomfort rose in me. You want me to contact him? Walker nodded. Yes, but not as a woman who's fully awakened and ready to send him to prison, as the desperate wife who wants answers, wants to keep the family together, afraid of scandal. He explained clearly. If you text him aggressively or threateningly, he'll shut down, call a lawyer, and say nothing. But if you act weak, confused, wanting one last conversation, he'll lower his guard. He'll say things closer to the truth, reveal what he thinks about the accidental fire, The men he hired, the plan. Rao added, "We won't let Avery be alone. The call or messages will be recorded. If there's a meeting afterward, it will be in public, with Walker's people watching and recording. But the first move must come from Avery's text." I looked at my phone on the table. Darius had been texting nonstop since last night. I tried not to read them, but I still saw the previews flash by. "Where are you? I'm worried sick. Answer me, I'm losing my mind." A part of me felt disgusted. Another part, honestly, still trembled at the thought of facing him, even through a few typed words. "If I text him," I said slowly, "what do I say?" Walker answered immediately, "You will say exactly 2 things. 1, that you're alive, hiding with Liam. 2, that you have seen part of what was in the safe, but you don't understand all of it yet. You want to hear his explanation because you don't want to expose family matters to outsiders." He paused, looking straight at me. "The wording can be adjusted, but the core is this. Make him think you are still the wife you used to be. The woman afraid of scandal, afraid of breaking the family, willing to sit and listen to his excuses." Rao looked at me, her voice gentle but firm. "Avery, only you can play this role. Darius is used to seeing you soft. This time, that softness will be the trap." I stayed silent for a moment. In my mind, I saw Liam holding me during the night of the fire, the notebook with the line, "The boy must go." I thought about this. If we stayed silent, if we did nothing, would Darius stop? Or one day, would he find another way to finish it? I picked up my phone. The screen was still lit, a long list of unread messages from Darius sitting there. I scrolled quickly to the bottom, my hand slightly shaking but my eyes clearer. "Okay," I said, this time not asking anything. "Help me draft the message, I'll send it." I paused, adding one more sentence. "But from this moment on, I'm no longer his real wife. I'm only acting one last time." Rao nodded. Walker nodded too, satisfied that the crucial piece had been secured. On the table, the brown leather notebook still lay there. For the first time in years, I looked at Darius's handwriting without seeing the man I once loved. I only saw the true face of someone who planned to kill his wife and child, and I knew the next part of this story would be the moment he faced what he wrote with his own hand. The night before, I drafted a short message exactly as Walker instructed. "Meet me at Freedom Grove Park at 10 a.m. alone." In less than 10 seconds, Darius replied, "I'll be there. Everything is just a misunderstanding." Walker saw the reply and said only, "Good, he won't have time to prepare." The next morning, I wore a shirt with a recording device attached. Walker placed his team throughout the park. A bird feeder, a jogger, a couple arguing, a maintenance worker, all undercover officers. I was told not to look around too much so I wouldn't give anything away. I sat on the exact bench we'd agreed on. At 10, Darius walked toward me. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red from lack of sleep, but his posture was still calculating. He sat down and spoke quietly. "Avery, you're really alive. God, I thought..." I cut him off. "You thought the fire had taken care of everything?" Darius froze for half a second. "You're being manipulated by someone. You don't know what I've been through." I placed the photocopied page on my lap, not letting him touch it. "Perfect accident. Living room first. Make sure the wife and the boy are both home." "Explain that." Darius glanced down, then instantly looked up again, changing his tone. "You don't understand what's happening. I owed money. I was cornered. I was trying to protect you and Liam. They took advantage of me. I said directly, "Then why did you text, 'Don't let anyone survive'?" Darius swallowed, then pressed through his teeth. "You have no idea what you're ruining. Everything was planned so no one would suspect anything. You went through my things. You took papers. You ran. You've destroyed the entire plan. I left space for him to expose himself further." "Everything? What plan?" I asked. Darius snapped. "You ruined my plan. From beginning to end, I just needed everything to pass as an accident. If you had stayed quiet, it would have been done. That was the signal Walker needed." I heard a tiny radio crackle somewhere far behind. I stayed calm. "So, you admit it?" "Avery, don't talk like that. You don't know what I had to do to get out." I tilted my head. "By burning the house while your wife and child were asleep?" Darius clenched his hands, his face twisted, half angry, half confused. "I did everything for another chance at life. I had no other way left." I didn't respond, but several passers-by quietly stood up, moving toward us in the predetermined pattern. A calm, male voice spoke behind me. "Darius Morgan, please stand up and put your hands forward. We need to speak with you." Darius turned around. His eyes darted, realizing the people around him were no longer just park visitors. I saw a flash of panic cross his face. "Who are you? I didn't do anything." Darius stepped back. Walker held out his badge. "Special Investigations Unit. You are suspected of involvement in arson, conspiracy to cause serious harm, and coordinating hired individuals to endanger human life. Stay calm." "No, you have no evidence," Darius shouted. I spoke each word clearly. "We do. The notebook and the burner phone you hid." Darius looked at me like he wanted to tear me apart, then turned to run. 2 officers lunged, but he dodged too quickly. I stood up abruptly, not fast enough to move aside before he turned back, grabbed my arm, and yanked me close. A thin knife pressed against my neck. "Back off, all of you!" he screamed. The officers froze. Walker lifted both hands. "Darius, don't do this. Put the knife down. No one wants to shoot you." "Shut up," Darius yelled. "She's coming with me. Nobody moves." I felt the blade press a little deeper, but I kept my voice steady. "You're not going to do it. You've never done anything yourself. You always hire someone else." Darius flinched. An instinctive reaction. That split second was enough. A short, sharp crack rang out. Darius screamed, dropping the knife. He grabbed his wrist, blood trickling. Officers immediately pinned him to the ground, handcuffing him. I was pulled backward. Darius was still shouting, "You'll all pay! Avery, say something! You know I didn't mean—" I watched as he was shoved face down on the concrete, legs kicking uselessly. No confidence left, no calm, no charming mask he used to fool everyone. A female officer read the rights. "You have the right to remain silent." Darius looked around, seeing everyone staring at him. No sympathy, no surprise, only the eyes of people witnessing the bare truth of who he really was. I stood still. No mercy, no explanation, no stepping in. In that moment, I realized, from now on, I don't belong to fear anymore. Walker approached, his voice steady and sure. "You did very well, Avery. Everything he said was recorded. He's not getting out of this." I only nodded. There was nothing more to say. Darius was dragged past me, still yelling, "Avery, you'll regret this. Listen to me." I turned away. He no longer had the right to touch a single second of my life. For the first time in years, I saw Darius completely powerless. No control, no excuses, no chance to perform as the doting husband. Only the truth, and the truth, finally stood on its own. Darius's arrest right there in the park immediately opened the path for a federal investigation. The evidence from the safe, the burner phone, and the notebook was submitted to the prosecutor the same day. Walker said briefly, "With this much, he's not getting out." Right after, a wider search warrant was issued. Investigators collected more bank transaction data, credit card statements, life insurance records, and loan records in Darius's name. Everything matched the notebook entries. The two hired men were arrested early the next morning. One of them confessed immediately. "He gave us the house key. He said his wife and kid would definitely be home that night. He said make it look like an electrical short. He paid half up front. The rest after the insurance payout." The statement was fully recorded with a court-appointed attorney present. The prosecution kept everything. Darius's lawyer immediately requested a meeting to negotiate. Rao said plainly, no amount of money can undo what he did. They were forced to bring the case to trial. The trial opened within 2 months. Darius appeared in an orange prison jumpsuit, hair trimmed, face tight with tension. His legal team argued mental instability, pressure from criminal groups, and requested a psychological evaluation. The prosecutor read a list of 14 charges aloud to the entire courtroom: first-degree attempted murder, 2 counts of intentional arson, insurance fraud, federal conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, association with organized crime, asset concealment, witness intimidation, and several smaller counts. Darius's lawyers fought back. Our client was under financial duress, psychologically unstable, and threatened. The notes in the notebook were imagination, not actual conduct. The prosecutor displayed the text messages on the large screen. "Don't let anyone survive. Not even the boy." The courtroom went silent. A financial expert testified next. He laid out every transaction, every cash withdrawal, every deposit into underground casinos. Most of the money flowed from the family joint account to Darius's personal accounts, then into intermediary accounts used by criminal groups. "This is not the behavior of someone coerced," he concluded. "This is a deliberate, months-long operation." A representative from the insurance company testified afterward. He was the one who asked to raise his wife's life insurance payout from $1 million to $2,800,000, and he asked very detailed questions about payout procedures for deaths involving fire. The prosecutor asked, did he seem frightened or coerced during these conversations? No, he was calm. Asked many technical questions, not someone being cornered. The second hired man, the one waiting outside the night of the fire, was called to testify as well. He said, "He told us his wife was weak, slept easily. The kid wouldn't run in time. He just needed us to do the rest." Darius's attorney tried. "You could be lying to reduce your sentence?" He answered, "I'll take responsibility for what I did." But he gave the key. He set the timing. He chose the day. "I don't need to make things up. I only had to testify once." Rao instructed me to keep my statement brief. The prosecutor, "Can you recount the night of the incident?" I gave a short version. Liam's warning, the sound of the door opening, the smell of gasoline, the fire, the message, "Sleep well, you two," and how I had to hide in the dark watching my own house burn. His attorney asked, "Are you sure you're not exaggerating?" In a state of panic, memory can be distorted. I replied, "The court doesn't need an explanation of my emotions. The court only needs the truth of what I saw." No one mentioned bringing Liam to testify. He was too young. It wasn't necessary. A psychologist appeared at Darius's request. He talked about stress, financial crisis, disordered state. The prosecutor asked exactly one question. At any point, did you see the defendant lose the ability to distinguish right from wrong? The doctor was silent for a few seconds, then said, "No." At that point, the defense strategy was nearly collapsing. His attorney shifted to a different angle. Our client did not want to harm his wife and child. He only wanted to stage a fire to collect insurance money. The hired men went too far. The prosecutor responded by playing the arsonist's recorded statement, "Don't let anyone survive. There are 2 people in the house. Do it fast. Leave no trace." No one said anything further. On the sentencing day, the courtroom was unusually quiet. I was not present. I sat in Rao's office watching the live broadcast. Liam was in the next room playing with her son. The judge read the sentence. The defendant, Darius Morgan, is sentenced to 28 years in federal prison, not eligible for early parole. All major charges are upheld. Court adjourned. There was no applause, no protest, only his attorney standing to request the right to appeal. The judge nodded, expression unchanged. Walker called me. He has no room to maneuver. Even if he appeals, it won't reduce much. You and Liam are safe now. I answered, "I understand." Rao placed a photocopy of the ruling in front of me. "It's over, Avery. From here on, your life belongs to you and your son." That evening, I put Liam to bed. I said briefly, "The court ruled. Your father will be gone for a very long time." Liam asked, "Will we ever see him again?" I shook my head. "No, you don't need to." He nodded softly, not scared, not shaken, just calm, as if he finally understood that the worst had passed. I turned off the lights. The room was silent. No crackling fire, no door bursting open, no footsteps of a stranger. Only the breathing of the child I had protected by every possible means. A dark chapter had closed, by law, by truth, by evidence that could not be denied. And the next chapter, the one without Darius, finally began. After the trial, I started putting the rest of my life back together as quickly as I could. The house had turned to ash. All documents, belongings, memories were gone. I went with Rao to the social services office to complete temporary assistance paperwork. A week later, I found a small rental house in a quiet neighborhood in Matthews. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a front yard just big enough for Liam to plant a few pots of flowers. There wasn't much to move in. A few donated clothes, a cheap wooden bed, a used dining table from a secondhand store. But the house had solid locks, bright windows, and friendly neighbors. That was enough. Liam began therapy every Monday. During the first session, he said nothing. But by the 3rd week, he started speaking a little. His therapist told me, "The key is a safe environment. Your son is recovering at the right pace." I nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. I joined a support group for women experiencing domestic violence at Rao's suggestion. There, I met many people with stories more horrifying than I imagined. When it was my turn to speak, everyone listened without interrupting, without asking uncomfortable questions. An older woman held my hand and said, "You survived. Now you can help others." After the meeting, the group coordinator invited me to volunteer as a support worker. I was surprised. I've never done this kind of work. She replied, "You don't need experience. You only need your own truth." From then on, I spent several days a week answering calls on the hotline. Many women called in panic. Many just needed to hear the words, "You're not alone." I said that sentence many times. One day, Rao visited my home. She looked around the small room and said, "Avery, I don't think you're just a survivor. You have a very clear way of arguing, of asking questions, of defending your point. You should consider studying law." I laughed. I'm 34, starting almost from nothing. Isn't it too late to study law?" "It's not too late," Rao answered. "You have motivation many students don't. You understand the value of justice through your own experience." She placed the application packet for an evening pre-law program at a community college in front of me. "You don't have to decide now, but I think you should try." That evening, I opened the first page of the introductory law book she gave me. Liam sat beside me, doing his math homework. We were both silent, each pursuing our own goal but sharing the same old table. The following week, I applied. During the interview, the instructor asked, "Why do you want to study law?" I replied simply, "Because I know what happens when women don't have a voice of their own." He nodded. "That's enough." On the first night of class, I felt a little out of place seeing most students nearly a decade younger than me. But the instructor began with, "Here, age gives neither advantage nor disadvantage. Knowledge is where everything begins." I opened my notebook and wrote down every line. Our lives gradually stabilized. During the day, I worked part-time at Rao's office, helping organize files, answering calls, learning to draft basic forms. In the evening, I attended class. I came home close to 10, but I still read a few more pages before sleeping. Even though he was young, Liam understood the new schedule. "When you finish school, what will you do?" he asked. "I want to help people like me." "Like Ms. Rao?" "Something like that." He just nodded and said, "I'll do my homework next to you so you won't be lonely." From then on, every night he pulled up a chair beside me, reading or coloring. About 6 months later, I was officially invited to work part-time as a legal assistant. Rao said, "I'm not giving you special treatment. You're good at this, that's all." I thanked her. Not for the job, but because she showed me I could go farther than I ever thought. Liam began sleeping better, the nightmares almost gone. I no longer flinched at every sound near the door. The mornings when the two of us had breakfast in the small kitchen, sunlight hitting the table, they were simple but unmistakably peaceful. One evening, while I was preparing class notes, Liam suddenly said, "Mom, I think our house is safe now." I turned to him. "Why do you think so?" "Because I don't hear Dad anymore." I gently squeezed his shoulder. No explanations, no corrections, just accepting that he had come a long way. A year after moving, I spoke at a conference on domestic violence prevention. When I finished, a young woman came to me, eyes filled with tears. "Because of you, I had the courage to leave last night. If you could do it, I can too." That was all I needed to hear. That night, I came home late. Liam was already asleep. I set my bag on the table and looked around the small house. Not luxurious, not fully furnished, but everything in it was my choice. I sat down, opened my book, and continued writing my essay for constitutional law class. Every line, every note, every recorded lecture reminded me that this new life was moving in the right direction. No more shouting, no more threats, no lingering smell of smoke in my memory. Only the two of us, and a path opening ahead, a life rebuilt from ruins but steady, clear, and determined by me alone. It was the first time in years that I understood what peace truly meant. 3 years passed faster than I expected. Studying law, nights staying up until 2 a.m. taking notes, the internships assisting Rao, it added up to an opportunity I never imagined I would have. The morning I received the exam results, I opened my email in the small kitchen. Only one line. "Congratulations, you passed." I froze for a few seconds. No crying, no cheering. I just exhaled hard, closed the laptop, and picked up the phone to call Rao. "I passed. I knew you would," Rao replied. "Come to the office tomorrow to complete the onboarding. We have work to do." The next day, I officially signed with Rao and Associates as a new attorney. No big celebration, no party. Rao simply handed me a file. "Your first case. A mother of 2. Abusive husband, restraining order violated. You'll come with me for the interview." I nodded. The first case led to the second, then the third. Most of them were women facing financial control, threats, manipulation, or stalking. Many brought their children, holding them tight as if they were the only solid thing left. During consultations, when they said, "I don't know where to go," he said, "If I leave, I'm scared my kids will be hurt." I responded with short, clear sentences, just as Rao taught me, "We'll protect you. There are legal ways to stop him. You and your children are not alone." No one in the room knew my past except Rao and Walker, but every time I said, "You're not alone," I knew the words were not only for them, they were also for the version of me 3 years ago, the one who sat trembling in the night watching my house burn. Liam is now 12. He's taller, his voice deeper, his eyes steadier. He no longer panics at loud noises or startles when someone knocks. He still goes to therapy once a month as part of his recovery, but the doctor says he has surpassed expectations. One afternoon, I came home from work and saw Liam wrapping a small gift box. "What's that, sweetheart?" I asked. Liam handed me the box. "A gift for you. Congratulations on becoming a lawyer." I opened it. Inside was a metal keychain shaped like a book. Engraved on it were the words, "For the strongest woman I know, Liam." I couldn't speak for a few seconds. Liam looked at me and smiled. "You know, I'm really proud of you, Mom." I placed the gift on my desk. Simple, but probably the most valuable thing I had ever received. Work at Rao's office grew heavier. I handled cases involving women and children, exactly the group I understood best. Not because I wanted to revisit my past, but because I had an advantage. I recognized signs of abuse even when the victim didn't say them out loud. I knew when they were hiding something, when they wanted to withdraw a report but were actually terrified. One day, Rao called me into the conference room. "Avery, would you be interested in leading the training session for the volunteer group?" "Me?" "Yes. You're persuasive, and you understand how to talk to women who are being controlled." I accepted. During the first training session, I stood in front of about 30 volunteers. I didn't tell my story in detail. I only used real situations, steps for processing cases, templates for restraining orders, and how to contact shelters. I spoke slowly, clearly, without dramatizing anything. At the end of the session, a middle-aged woman came to me. "You speak differently from the lawyers I've met. Shorter, more decisive," I replied, "because I know delays sometimes cost lives." She stayed silent for a moment, then nodded firmly as if something finally made sense to her. A year later, I was assigned the most complex case, a mother and her 9-year-old daughter who had fled from another state. The husband was hunting them, had money, had connections, and was extremely dangerous. Rao said, "I want you to take this. You handle crises well. We met the mother and daughter in a shelter." The little girl held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes wide and alert. The mother spoke softly. "I don't know who to trust anymore." I handed her my office card. "Start with me." We immediately filed for protective orders, coordinated with local police, and arranged to transfer the case across state lines. During that time, I prepared the documents for the court to issue temporary orders as fast as possible. 3 weeks later, the court approved a long-term restraining order. The mother hugged her child, and the little girl turned to me. "What do you do for work?" I smiled. "I protect people like you and your mom." That was the moment I understood that everything I had gone through wasn't only to survive. It was so I could stand where I stood that day. One late evening, while I was preparing a presentation for a legal conference, Liam walked over and leaned against the doorway. "Mom, are you tired?" "A little," I said. "But I'm okay. Why aren't you asleep?" Liam came closer and looked at the stack of documents. "You've helped so many people. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do." I looked at him. 3 years earlier, he used to hide behind my back in fear. Now he was the one reminding me of the purpose I was following. "You've changed a lot too, Liam. Because you're strong, so I know I'll be okay too." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I just placed my hand on his head. Looking back, I realized something I had never said out loud. I was becoming the person I had needed that night at the airport, the night the house burned, the night I first hid in Rao's office. Someone who knows how to listen, someone who knows the law, someone who knows when to say, "Leave now," and someone who stands in the dark and lights the way out for others. On the day I signed the contract to officially become an associate attorney at the firm, Rao said to me, "You've gone far beyond anything Dale ever hoped for, and I think he would be proud." I replied, "I'm only trying not to waste the opportunity he left for me." Rao smiled, "No, you're creating opportunities for others." My new life didn't have dramatic or glamorous moments. It only had long work days, late nights of studying, thick case files, and the sound of Liam's footsteps in the hallway of our small home. But it was what I chose, what I built, what I protected. I knew I had stepped out of the darkness, and I knew I would help pull many others out with me, because if I could survive, they could too. And that was the only promise I wanted to keep. Forever. 5 years after the fire, my sons and my life had changed so much that if I didn't look back at the old legal documents, I might not believe what we had lived through. The small rental house had been replaced by a light blue home I bought with my own savings, and a support grant for attorneys specializing in domestic violence cases. The house wasn't big, but it was bright, safe, and quiet enough that every morning I heard Liam calling Mom instead of the sound of fire alarms. Liam was 13, almost up to my shoulder, smiling often, and fond of saying, "Mom, I can do it myself, don't worry." He still saw a therapist every 3 months as a mental health checkup. His nightmares had gone from weekly to only a few times a year, and then almost disappeared. The therapist said, "Stability is the best medicine. Your son is on the right track." I nodded. No further explanation needed. 3 times a week, I led the victim support group at the community center. The women who came all shared something in common: cautious eyes, soft voices, and hands gripping their bags as if that was the only thing they still controlled. I didn't tell my story right away. I just sat beside them, offered water, and let them choose their own moment to speak. One Friday afternoon, the center was busier than usual. A young woman sat across from me, shaking so much she had to hold her cup with both hands. When I asked, "Are you safe now?" she only nodded and then burst into tears. I handed her tissues and said simply, "We start from here. You already did the hardest part, stepping out." That sentence wasn't poetic encouragement. It was a truth I had once learned with my own life. At the end of October, right after I finished a meeting with the federal attorneys about expanding a hotline for minors, Liam stood at the office door. "Mom, are you done?" I packed the files, locked the cabinet, and walked outside with him. The late afternoon sun lit the freshly cut grass, and he carried 2 cups of homemade juice. We had barely sat on the wooden steps when Liam suddenly asked, "Are you happy, Mom?" I turned to look at him. It wasn't a random question from a kid. He meant it seriously, like he needed to be sure of something. I answered with the simplest truth. I am. More than I ever thought I could be. Liam nodded, smiled, and rested his head on my shoulder for a moment. He didn't say anything else, but I understood. He just needed to know I was okay. And that allowed him to grow up without fearing the past coming back. My first case of the new year was protecting a mother of 2 who was being threatened by her husband. When I stood in court, I didn't shake anymore. I no longer felt like a victim trying to regain balance. I stated each clause clearly, cited each statute, filed for an emergency protective order, and presented the recorded evidence. The judge asked, "Attorney Avery, what do you propose to ensure the safety of the 2 children?" I answered immediately, "Transfer them to a shelter within 24 hours and request that the court allow police checks whenever needed during the first 30 days. When the hearing ended, the mother hugged me and said something I never forgot. If I had met someone like you earlier, I wouldn't have been afraid for so long. I only replied, "Well, you've met me now, and I won't let anyone hurt you again." My life stayed busy, but it no longer felt like running. I knew I had passed the darkest point of my life when I could name everything calmly without avoiding it, without trembling. One evening, while I was reviewing materials for a seminar, Liam came in and placed his hand on my shoulder. "Mom, if you hadn't run back then, I don't know where we'd be now." "But I did run," I said. "And now we're here." "I think you're stronger than anyone I know." "I only did what I had to do, Liam." "No, you did more than that." I looked at my son, the boy who once clung to me in fear at the airport, now standing steady in front of me, peaceful and grounded. I realized something I had never said aloud. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore, because I had walked through it once and I knew the way out. In the 5th year after the tragedy, I organized a gathering for the victim support group. For the first time, I told my story fully, without avoiding anything. When I finished, the room was silent for a few seconds. Then one woman stood and clapped, then another and another, until the entire room stood. I didn't add anything. I didn't need to. I just bowed my head in thanks. At that moment, I understood that my story no longer belonged only to me. It belonged to every woman searching for a way out. I knew there would always be someone who needed to hear it, and I was ready to tell it whenever needed. Thank you for staying with me to these final lines. I don't know where you're from, what stage of life you're in, or whether you've ever faced darkness. But thank you for taking the time to listen to the story of a mother who almost lost everything. If you have thoughts, memories, or anything you want to share, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story. And if you'd like to join me on future journeys, remember to like, subscribe, and follow so you won't miss any upcoming stories. Thank you sincerely. I wish you peace always.